Hi everyone and welcome to tonight's meeting. I declare the meeting of the Port Phillip City Council open, and I welcome all our beloved members of the public who are here tonight. Hope you're feeling well. I'm feeling very sick, so you've got to be gentle with me. The City of Port Phillip respectfully acknowledges the Yalukit Willam clan of the Bunurong language group, and we pay our respects to their elders, both past and present. We acknowledge and uphold their continuing relationship to this land. Council has a local law that determines how tonight's meeting will run and be conducted. There's time allotted in tonight's agenda for public question time and also to make speeches prior to an agenda item. There's also an opportunity for members of the public to ask a question or make a comment on a specific item in tonight's agenda. This will be done prior to Council considering the item. If you wish to ask a question or speak to a report, please complete the blue form that's available at the table, and I encourage you to limit your questions and comments to 3 minutes, and particularly avoid repeating any points that have been already made by other speakers. It's good not to repeat these things, even if you really agree with it, because let's hope we got it the first time. Please note that all council meetings are now being live streamed. Live streaming and recording allows the community to watch and listen to the meetings in real time. Please note also, in accordance with Council's local law, that this meeting cannot be filmed or audio taped unless permissions granted by the Mayor. In any unlikely event of an emergency evaluation, please follow the instructions of the Chief Warden. So, let's start off. Apologies. Councillors, we have no apologies. Full house. 2. Minutes of previous meetings. Councillors, the minutes have been circulated for the meeting held on the 3rd of April. Are there any questions in relation to these minutes? If not, can I have a motion in relation? Moved Councillor Pearl. Seconded Councillor Simic. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Declarations of conflicts of interest. Does anyone have a conflict of interest in a matter being discussed at tonight's meeting?
Yes, Mayor. My name is Councillor Marcus Pearl, and I declare in relation to item 18.1, the award of contract 2186, provision of internal audit and core assurance services, that I have a direct conflict of interest in this matter.
Thanks very much. Petitions and joint letters. Councillors, we have 2 petitions tonight. Item 4.1, petition parking and street access affected by the Melbourne Grand Prix. Councillors, we have received 1 request from a member of the public to speak to this item. Two, Marita Harney and Adrian Jackson. So, Marita, could I ask you to come and sit in that seat there, please? To push the button with that turns the mic on, and just read your name and suburb into the record, please. Sorry, I don't think you... Is it on? Yes, it is on. Sorry.
So with no time limit on the parking, we're a magnet for all sorts of cars, both with permits and
Marita, could I ask you to draw... your 3 minutes is abated.
Well, we wish to see, if possible, blanket 2-hour restrictions on cars.
Sorry, somebody's phone has started.
Okay, we'd like to see blanket 2-hour restrictions on all parking in the local access. So strict controls on the supply and distribution of buildings and strict control of traffic management with fines and pay rate for extended Thank you.
Adrian Jackson.
Adrian Jackson, Park. I live in Richardson Street, between Wadebridge and Fraser Street. This property where the petition is. We've had 2 surveys from council where they were trying to push 2-hour parking and everybody, most of them rejected and council. Well, yeah, council has tried to impose 2-hour parking on us for irritated and the residents of Richmond. This sort of ad hoc of it, say, the Grand Prix on, makes people park here. There's no reason. That's parking. 50% of those parking spots in the Grand Prix are really, and that's just the next lockdown. Anybody can park here. There's also off-street parking in tenement spaces behind the section where the petition is initiated. Sundays in summer, all of my streets are parked out with outdoor events till 11 o'clock in the morning. We don't complain about that. And it's in Kilda Festival, parked out all the way down to Armstrong Street, Monday to visitors. We don't complain about that. They're public spaces. It's not public to use. It's residents or business. That's all I'm saying. Just stick with what we've got.
Thanks very much, Adrian. Councillors, questions or resolutions? Councillor Simic, happy to put it? The officer's recommendation. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Copsey? Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Simic?
Well, thank you to the two community members who've come to present to us tonight and have collected this petition and presented it to us. The steps from here, and there's no officer's comment to the petition and the information currently. The steps from here is that officers will review the information provided now that we've accepted the petition, and will come back to us with a proposal to consider. And that will happen in due course. So thank you for coming tonight. The motion I've moved is for us to accept the recommendation, to accept the officer's recommendation to accept the petition and review it and bring back information to council.
Thanks very much. Councillor Copsey? Anyone else? Councillor Voss?
Thank you. I just wanted to note that this, the information in this petition has come to us in letters numerous times over the years. So I'm supportive of the officer's recommendation to report back to us. But I'd also have to say that I would like the officers also to look at the options in the petition carefully, and also to work collaboratively with the Grand Prix management to get a satisfactory outcome to all parties.
Thanks very much. Anyone else? Do you wish to close, Councillor Simic? I'll go to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Petition number 4.2. There are the Nimmo Street plane trees. There's no speakers to that. Councillors, do we have any Questions or resolutions? Okay, Councillor Pearl. Do I have a seconder for that? Thanks, Councillor Baxter. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Pearl? Councillor Baxter? Anyone else? Move to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. 5, the sealing schedule. Councillors, we have no documents that require sealing. Now we have something that's embarrassing. Presentation of award. Prior to the next agenda item, which is public question time, pursuant to Council's meeting procedure, local law, the CEO has requested, and I have given consent to, the adding of an agenda item to the meeting tonight relating to the presentation of an award. So the CEO is to advise that Council has recently received a Water Sensitive City Award. And I'll now ask Lily Rosick, Council's General Manager of City Strategy and Sustainable Development, to say a few glowing words about us and present the award to someone called the Mayor.
Through you, Mr Mayor, it will give me great pleasure to do so. The Cooperative Research Centre for Water Sensitive Cities has awarded the City of Port Phillip with the inaugural Water Sensitive Cities Award. The Water Sensitive Cities Award is based on the results of recent application of the CRC's Water Sensitivity Cities Index, a tool for benchmarking cities, towns and regions against 34 indicators that categorise a water-sensitive city. The award recognises the City of Port Phillip's application of water-sensitive principles to manage water in adaptive and collaborative ways. Council recently benchmarked progress against the goals of the Water Sensitive City and rated the highest in Australia to date out of 21 cities who have undertaken the process. Our key strengths include a strong vision and commitment to integrated water management, a high level of skills across the organisation and collaboration with our partners in the community. The CRC specifically mentioned our work on managing flooding in Elwood and planning for Fisherman's Bend. The CRC congratulated the City of Port Phillip on its outstanding effort, and particularly one of the council officers, Sam Innes, Senior Water Cycle Management Officer, who was the driving force behind benchmarking the city's performance.
Yeah. Oh, do I come down and get it now? Can I just say before I do, this is incredibly exciting. The council made water management one of our transformative issues, and to get this validation from outside, the CRC is a research unit that cooperates between academia and industry, and is based at my alma mater, Monash. And look, it's presided over by a former mayor from South Melbourne, Professor John Thwaite. So it's really very exciting, and it's great that we've got this external validation. Sorry about that. So I just thought I'd mention that we're going to have public question time now, and after that we have councillors' question time, and then I am suggesting that I reorder the presentation of reports to go straight to the dogs, because we have more speakers. Sorry? Okay, public question time. Councillors, we have two people who have requested to ask a question tonight, and I'll ask these requests in the orders that they will receive. I'll now call on Mr. Alan West to come forward. And Al, could you please state your name and suburb for the record? This is a journey you know well.
Back on?
We.
Alan West, from Kilda West. I'm just come down to try to find some information and some clarification on the suspect flammable cladding on the buildings in City of Port Phillip. The Age a few months ago wrote up that there was possibly 59. There was an audit commenced last year. It's now finished by COP that studied new to 10-year-old buildings. I've been advised that that's possibly not going to be made public, so I'd like some official reasons why. And I'm also been advised that owners of the buildings and possibly the body corporates have been advised, but my worry is, has everyone been advised? I worry for the people that live in these buildings that may or may not even know they live within something that is been audited as suspect. So my question is just basically, please can I have some reasons why it's not going to be made public, the audit, and could Council do a little bit more to ensure that all the occupants in those buildings are made aware that they live in a building with suspect cladding? Thank you.
Thanks very much for that question. Ms. Rosick?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. West is correct. We are completing audits, but I just want to clarify we haven't completed all the audits that we're scheduled to complete. We are working cooperatively with the VBA. In regards to releasing the information publicly of all the audit information, we're not proposing to do that, and that's consistent with the approach of the state government, and it revolves around protecting the people that live there and making sure that no untoward behaviours occur in regards to those properties. The VBA is taking over management of any properties that are high risk or extreme risk. As far as Council's municipal building surveyor is concerned and our responsibilities, we do notify and issue orders if required to body corporates. They are required under the law to notify all occupants of those buildings of any orders that we issue under the Building Act. So the residents are definitely, should be, I shouldn't say definitely, but should be protected. It would be a breach not to notify any residents living in at-risk buildings. And us, council staff, building staff, are happy to also provide information to anyone that inquires of council in regards to any potential risk of any potential building. And it is a well-known issue, has received a lot of publicity, so we are getting calls. And we're also looking at other opportunities to publicise any information as it becomes evident. So that's what I can offer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. In one of life's great ironies, I visited the building where the VBA is and their cladding's being stripped off because it's dangerous. Adrian Jackson.
My question it relates to Barry Humphries, who's recently been knocked off the award ceremony for the Melbourne International Comedy Festival. Now, Barry Humphries is an AO. He's a commander of the British Empire, which the Queen gave him because we don't have imperial honours now. And I can recall listening to his records back in the 1960s. Relatives would come over and they were mainly Methodists and Presbyterians, so there wasn't much drinking. And I put this record on about 11 o'clock at night and we'd crack up laughing. I've been to 4 or 5 of his shows in Melbourne, including one was in the Palais. I think the first one I went to was called An Evening's Intercourse with Barry Humphries, which I thought was a great title. intercourse meaning talking. I remember he was tied up with the Adelaide Festival a couple of years ago, and he berated people for swearing as part of the PR. That was all part of the PR, I think. And of course, we now see most of the comedians are swearing like troopers. I won't say like drunken sailors. Labor people in Queensland say that, attacking the sailors. But you know, relax. You know. So the question is, can you write to the Melbourne International Comedy Festival, having a go at them for taking away the Barry Award? I don't know who nominated him for that, or his name for that, back in about 2000, I think, and tell them to grow up.
Thanks very much for your question, Adrian. We'll take it on notice and think about it. Well, look, I undertake to discuss it at next week's councillor briefing time, and we'll make a decision then. Thanks very much. Councillors, it's councillor question time. Are the councillors, are there any questions? Councillors Pearl and Voss.
Just two quick questions. I'll ask one and then let Councillor Voss go. Just in relation to the rollout of the national broadband network, particularly in South Melbourne, a number of residents have alerted council this week about footpath and nature strip damage that hasn't been repaired to a sufficient standard. I would agree with that, having looked at it. I'm just wondering what council's policy and actions in relation to the national broadband network rollout and the remediation works that they have to do will be going forward to ensure that our community isn't disadvantaged in terms of footpaths and gardens.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the NBN rollout is guided by the Telecommunications Act and they're not required to do permits or get permission from council, so our ability to control what they do and where they do it is limited. In relation to the area that Councillor Pearl is referring to, our officers have been actively in contact with the NBN, who have been in contact with the residents and have advised that they will be reinstating the area. The grassed area, for example, will be reseeded. So the NBN have indicated that they will be reinstating the area, but their policy, they do not, for example, use turf, they will just use seed.
Thanks very much. Councillor Voss?
I've actually got a follow-up to that, if I could.
Sure.
They're rolling out in a lot of places at the moment, and so they tend to, what I've seen, put the NBN down the centre of the footpath and then just cover it with a different quality of asphalt. It's sort of rounded. So what resources do we have to go back and get that whole thing done rather than just have it hodgepodge as it is?
We're a bit down the microphone, I'm afraid.
Through you, Mr Mayor, we do a inspections program of our footpaths. Our footpath renewal budget is driven based on asset condition, and we try to keep the assets in a set condition over a period of time. In these particular cases, generally they've reinstated the footpath to a decent condition, not necessarily the same condition as it was beforehand, but it's still functional. If it's not functional, then we may go in and do additional works to tidy it up. And while I can't relay this solely to the NBN, I do know that the kind of works that we do across the board in reinstating poor work from utility providers, NBN and others, ranges in the hundreds of thousands of dollars per year of additional money that we spend to fix that up.
Thanks very much. Councillors Pearl or Voss, any further questions? Councillor
Was that all
Pearl?
right? Sorry, you actually... Anyway, I shouldn't be going, but I'll go. Just a quick one. I had a bit of a crack at Gasworks for not turning up to a meeting at our last council meeting when an item was on the agenda, which I usually do. I met with them this week and they told me they had no idea that item was coming up to the council meeting regarding their lease. I'm just wondering, is it possible for council to change some procedures whereby we can make a reasonable effort when lease-type documents or council motions relating to community groups or other entities can be advised once it's been put on the agenda. I know lots of people watch the website on Thursday and Friday afternoons waiting for the meeting agendas to come up, but most people are busy in their work and businesses.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I will check that. There is a standard that we do normally ensure they've been notified and are encouraged and invited to attend. I'll have to find out what's happened in that particular circumstance why it hasn't, if it hasn't. But that is our normal standard, but I'll double check with the team.
Councillor Voss.
Thank you. I've got two questions. The first one relates to the South Melbourne Primary School, our investment in the basketball netball courts. I'm just wondering is there an update about when that's going to be fully repaired and available? And my other question is around MREP. Just wondering how is it going? Is there any information that we could provide to the community about the progress of it?
So, Mr Trail will deal with the first one.
Through you, Mr Mayor, in relation to the first question, I can advise that the South Melbourne courts will be available from term 2, which is later this month.
Thank you. Mr Walters? You're Mr MREP?
Through you, Mr Mayor. With respect to the Melbourne Renewable Energy Project, we are currently in the process of transitioning all of our electricity accounts to the new provider, which is Tango Energy. The intent of the MREP group, once this process is completed, will be to have a launch event and council will be invited to attend that when the transition is complete. So there'll be some media opportunities around it, etc., or publications.
Thank you. Can I just clarify a couple of things? So are the windmills up as well, and is it generating power? I'm just trying to get a bit of a feel with what's actually going on.
Sorry. So it's actually about the windmills rather than the transactional stuff. It's still under construction at this point in time, and I'd have to check on the schedule and take that on notice on what the current status is, but it's under construction.
Thanks very much. So, councillors, I think we're questioned out. Now I'd like to go to reports, and I'd like to go to 12.1, a review of dogs off-leash areas along Port Phillip beaches and St Kilda Botanical Gardens. Councillors, we've got 5 speakers, and I'll read them out in the order that we have them. Amanda Levy, or is that Levi? Could I just ask you to read out your name and suburb?
Yes, Amanda Levi, Blackrock 3193. Mayor, Councillors and CEO, my name's Amanda Levi and I'm speaking tonight as President of the Bayside Dog Alliance and on behalf of the BDA members. The BDA supports and welcomes opportunities for greater access to off-leash space, to exercise dogs and provide the opportunity for socialisation and training of puppies and dogs in secure spaces, supporting the COP DAMP strategy and action plans. The Bayside Dog Alliance was formed 2 years ago to represent dog owners in Bayside and more recently Kingston and the City of Port Phillip. It is an incorporated association with nearly 1,000 members. The BDA and its members recognise that there does need to be a community balance between dog off-leash, on-leash and prohibited areas for dog recreation. Unfortunately, the recommendations of 12.1 do not seem to go far enough. Of the 8 locations reviewed, only 1 was recommended to trial an off-leash zone in the peak summer periods, South Melbourne Beach. For the most part, City of Port Phillip has adequate dog off-leash provisions, with notable exceptions of the Elwood Beach precinct and for Parkland, the Balaclava and St Kilda areas. Elwood Beach does not need to be fully opened up for dog off-leash access. The BDA requests an area adjacent to the 24/7 off-leash MO Moran Reserve to be allocated as 24/7 off-leash dog beach. Dogs can overheat quite quickly, particularly in the summer months. Given the restrictions from Point Ormond, with no off-leash area all the way down to Sandown Street in Brighton, the provision of 100 metres of beach commencing at Point Ormond would provide off-leash access for local residents. Having access to a number of 24/7 localised off-leash areas provides the following benefits: improved health and well-being for dog owners and their dogs, a dedicated space to contain dog off-leash activities away from those who do not want to be around dogs, improved compliance due to less confusion and lower civil disobedience, as there are local places to take dogs off-leash, less congestion at peak times, leading to a more enjoyable experience for all, and more importantly, lower incidence of reportable incidents. Less cars on the road with off-leash areas within walking distance, dogs who are more socialised, community inclusiveness for dog owners through socialisation, greater opportunities to train puppies and dogs. To sum it up, the BDA welcomes the trial of the South Melbourne off-leash area, and we would like this extended to a localised area at Elwood Beach for 24/7 off-leash activities. Thank you.
Thanks very much. That's great. Thanks, Amanda. Elizabeth Morrison. And we've met, haven't we?
We have. That's right. This is good.
It's
Thank
good?
you.
All good.
Great. Elizabeth Morrison, Beach Street, Port Melbourne. The review of the off-leash areas along Port Phillip beaches concluded that 77.8% of respondents were satisfied with congestion. However, congestion is given as a reason for change recommendation. This is difficult to comprehend. How is congestion defined and then measured? The earliest interviews were at 7 a.m. 5:30 a.m. congestion was never observed or directly reported through intercept interviews. I have often seen the Port Melbourne Dog Beach near the Yacht Club deserted before 7 a.m. Why a 5:30 a.m. change? Bayside and Kingston have on-leash requirements until sunrise, demonstrating an understanding of early morning access issues, as even at the sun solstice, sunrise is at 5:54 a.m. 4.1 continues. Over 80% of respondents consider the current dog off-leash provisions provide a good balance for all users. This is particularly noteworthy given the bias because dog owners were vastly overrepresented. A need for change is not indicated, a change disadvantaging older people, people with disability or medical conditions, young children and those with a history of dog trauma. By making the largest central area inaccessible to those wanting dog-free access, some residents will have to drive or walk long distances. The advantages cited in 4.10.5 means continuous exercise for dog owners at the expense of reduced opportunities for others. Any health gains for owners of the 7,000 registered dogs comes at a loss for many of the 110,000 plus residents. Health benefits loss would include having to walk on a flat hard surface instead of sand, which uses more calories and creates less joint strain. Overall, beach distances available and their distribution are critical. The largest Port Melbourne beach walking area is less than 1 kilometre, while the dog off-leash area from Bay Street to St Kilda would be an area of several kilometres. Already, the Middle Park Beach is the largest continuous beach walking area. To take away the largest dog-free area is not balanced or a protection of amenity. Effective control is problematic It seems few dog owners know that effective control in Port Phillip means not letting dogs worry, interfere with or annoy. A dog must return when called back. This is challenging when dogs are a long way from their owners. Conflict is avoided when there is a choice not to interact with dogs. If South Melbourne Beach access changes, the potential for conflict increases. Two more sentences. Rather than make a change to South Melbourne Beach at 5:30am, because 77.8% of respondents are satisfied with the level of congestion, we need to realistically look at the needs of the whole community. To recommend change after a survey showing such high satisfaction is unnecessary and lacks justice for the many who would be disadvantaged. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Patricia Goldie? Is Patricia here? All right.
So is this on or not? Okay, thank you. My talk is focused on the same recommendation to change the status at South Melbourne Beach.
Excuse me, Ms Goldie, could I just ask you to read your name and suburb?
Yes, Patricia Goldie, Port Melbourne. So there's a fine balance, we've just heard that. This proposed change would not be fair to people who want to swim, walk, before the heat of the day. There's often days, there's been very hot days in summer when I could not be starting my walk at 10am. I get heat stressed. A lot of older people do. Why should our fitness be compromised? A lot of people with children, they want to bring their families down. They don't want to have the dogs bounding around them necessarily. So the early morning is important. There are dog off-leash beaches on either side of South Melbourne Beach. So let's keep South Melbourne Beach protected. It's only 1.1 kilometres long, and there's a long way that dog owners can walk with their dogs on the beach between Port Melbourne and St Kilda Pier. So DAMP 2018 provides no evidence to support this recommendation. Just before I start to talk about the evidence, dog ownership was overrepresented in the resident respondents, 38%, and the beach respondents, 50.1%. Now, compared to 6.7%, which is the proportion of registered dogs as a proportion of the total population, that's a biased sample. Both of them are. One's much worse than the other, the beach respondents. The executive summary itself, 2.3, page 31, states, the survey demonstrates that generally over 80% of respondents consider the current dog off-leash provisions provide a good balance for all users. So there's no case with that level of satisfaction to have a change. Congestion has been proposed, as Libby has talked about. There actually was no problem. What the data, first of all, the data from the residents, their data was not specifically for the beach. It was for gardens, parks and other open places, and the beach was in there as well. If you look at the beach respondents, the people who answered on the beach, their satisfaction was 6.27 out of 10 when asked about congestion. That's a very pleasing, I mean, even with that bias from dog ownership, those people were happy. The data was collected right the way along from Sandridge to Elwood. The data is not specific to South Melbourne Beach. It cannot be pinpointed. So let's just say that the beach respondents, despite their dog ownership bias, were happy. How could councillors vote for the recommendation to reduce dog prohibited access? Many people without a dog want to access dog prohibited beaches, and it's not fair to take that time away, even in the early morning. I was deeply disappointed to read in the community impact that it's only the health of the dogs and their owners who are considered. My fitness, people like me, must not be ignored. We need to keep fit too for a whole host of health reasons. And
Patricia,
that's
could
a
we
big
wind
issue.
it up soon, please?
Oh, sure. Okay. All right. When I walk along the beaches, I have been attacked badly by a dog in Hawthorn, and I am very frightened of off-leash dogs. I want to be able to walk along the beaches because it's fantastic for me. But we must have fair and equitable access. We must feel safe, and I don't think this aspect is being considered for the people who do not want to walk with off-leash dogs.
Thanks
I've
very
had
much.
2 really bad experiences in Port Phillip too, but I can't go into that. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer Bishop? Well, that's fantastic, and I don't treat it as a bribe.
I'm not quite in Elwood, but I'm like 1 kilometre away. So this is to show that we've all got something in common. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Do we have to fill in forms? Thanks, Jen.
Okay, so I'm Jen Bishop. I'm from Rusden Street, Brighton, which is about 1 kilometre away from Elwood proper. And even though I have a Brighton address, I consider myself an Elwood person. Good evening, Mayor, Councillors, CEO and Gallery. I'm speaking on behalf of many local dog owners and community members and friends in the Elwood, North Brighton and adjacent Elstonwick area. I've lived in Rusden Street, Brighton for more than 17 years as I said, I'm less than 1 kilometre away from the Elwood area. I want to specifically acknowledge mine and the other people who are here gratitude for the City of Port Phillip's actions and their resourcing of the investigation of off-lead areas. So thank you for that. Kudos to you, and really appreciate you investigating that, because that's really important and really special that you're actually investigating it. It means a lot, so thank you. Dog owners are a significant number of residents in the City of Port Phillip and as a stakeholder neighbouring group. As you're well aware, there is a shrinking amount of open space in both the Bayside area and in the City of Port Phillip, significantly in relation to dog off-lead areas. So most recently you would be aware, or if you're not aware, that we've lost really the most massive area of open space for dogs in the inner south east of Melbourne, being Elstonwick Park South, which is now being given to the sporting groups on a regular basis, so most nights and most weekends. And that's already started to happen, the pre-season training, where dog owners and dog walkers have been moved away from Elstonwick Park South, and they're just turning away, so that they don't have that space anymore. It's significant and important for the City of Port Phillip because these are some of your residents and they don't have this space anymore. And so it's important that COP continues to investigate these areas for off-lead space as these areas shrink, because there's nowhere for people in high-rise apartments to go and take their dogs. And this leads to problems. It leads to civil disobedience. It leads to angry dogs. It leads to dogs that don't have anywhere to run. It leads to people being bitten in Hawthorn. It leads to increasing dog aggression. Dogs got to have places to run. So I'd like to support and recommend any trials that you have of dogs off-lead in the area of Port Phillip. So that would include the current 2 that you're investigating. So thank you. I'd like to encourage membership and ongoing dialogue with this excellent organisation, the Bayside Dog Alliance, that does represent, as she said, 1,000 members, but more significantly, there's a Facebook group of 4,000 of us who regularly share. So we are a significant stakeholder group, and we're very respectful and think it's important to respect the environment. How's that? Okay, thanks. So specifically, I'd like to discuss, and I think it's 18.2, if I'm not sure if I got it right or not. So explore the option to extend the dog off-lead area from the Rock Groin down to the Elwood Sailing Club. So as a person who's been walking down Elwood Beach for 17 years, and I walked down there 330 out of the 360 days of 17 years, I can tell you there has never been more than a handful of people on that space where dogs are not allowed for 330 out of the 365 days of 17 years. And we can't work out for the life of us why we can't walk down there from that, little bit down to the groin till 9:30 in the morning when there's no one there. Even on 30-degree days, there's no one there till 9:30. And I've been going down there 17 years. So on a monthly basis, I'd interact with hundreds, if not thousands, of dog owners in the local area. And I understand and I respect your survey, but it is a point-in-time survey. And the people I interact with on a regular basis, that's hundreds of people in the area, are saying, why can't we have just a little bit of area? Particularly for the after 7:30 swim. There is nowhere in that local area that I can take my 12-year-old dog for a swim, and she gets really hot. So, as Amanda said, it would be great to have 100 metres. But once again, thank you very much for your time and your attention. I appreciate anything that you can do. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Susan Taylor? Susan here? Oh, all right.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, councillors and council staff. Although it's been said before, I'd really like to repeat the thanks to the council and the staff for spending so much of the council's resources on this matter and so much time. I also really appreciate it. But I would like to make a few points, and I wanted to... my name's Susan Taylor, by the way, and I'm from Elwood. I wanted to make it clear that I'm only speaking about the beaches and not the botanical gardens. So the council has engaged consultants to undertake this research. I do believe, again, that there are quite a number of weaknesses in the research. And although they've tried to defend the research methodology that they've adopted, I wanted to point out, if it needs pointing out, that interviewing people on the beaches of the city of Port Phillip in November and December will absolutely guarantee that a large chunk of the community is not there on the beaches. I felt it was a very small sample, and I noted that a huge number, perhaps half of the people attempted to be questioned, either were not available or declined to answer. I wonder, therefore, and I'm not an expert in surveys, and I'm sure the consultants are, but I'm sure they also would want to defend their work. So I'm questioning whether those results are skewed. I think there are also another number of important things to note. In the council's paper, it was great to see the discussion about the positives of having dogs on beaches. I really appreciated seeing that balanced discussion. But I noted that the complaints, most of them that have been received, were not from incidents on beaches, but from commercial and residential areas. I thought that was quite a relevant factor to take into account. I can see that the Elwood Beach area in particular is used in the evening, and I can attest to that, being an Elwood resident. So perhaps we give up the request to have access in the evenings for the beaches of the city of Port Phillip, but as has been observed, there is no one on that beach in the morning. And I do still implore you to consider opening up that Elwood Beach in the mornings, even if it ends at 9 o'clock. The Surf Coast Shire has a wonderful model to have a look at. The other thing that was noted in the report was that Elwood residents do have to walk a considerable distance to get to an off-leash or even an on-leash beach. My next-door neighbour, who wanted to come and speak but wasn't able to, I haven't asked how old she is, but I think she's deep into her 70s, and she's been a resident in her house in Spray Street for, I think, over 40 years. She cannot get to a beach with her dogs, which she loves to walk, and she wanted to come and add her voice to the discussion. Also in paragraph 4.9, the paper notes that there are other beaches adjacent which have similar restrictions. For the life of me, I cannot see how that statement holds true. Those other beaches, Bayside and Kingston, although there is a no-go zone in each, and I expect that's probably because it's a marina or a habitat of some kind, there is timeshare in every other location. It might not be for the whole day, but it's for some part of every day during summer, there is beach access. Thanks, Mr Mayor. I also wanted to applaud the suggestion that there'd be a trial in South Melbourne, but I would like to, I would like to encourage Council to consider extending that trial, particularly to Elwood. I obviously have a vested interest, but the idea that instead of going to the beach we can just go to the Oval, well, we're in the city of Port Phillip and we're here because of the beaches. I would say that's a pretty universal comment. So I would like to again request on behalf of the petitioners that the Council consider extending the off-leash timeshare opportunity into Elwood and possibly in the future, if it works, to other areas. Thank you very much.
Councillors, before I go to questions, I've spoken with councillors and with the officers, and we've suggested that rather than do it all as one, we divide it into 4, and the suggestion of Councillor Pearl. So that would mean the slides at the moment would be 3.1, then 3.2 and 3.3 as a second slide, and there's a foreshadowed motion, I believe, there, so there's a new 3.2 slide for an alt-rec, and then there's 3.4, one slide, 3.5, up to 3 slides, I think, and 3.6. So given the multiple of slides, I think it's better to disaggregate. So if that's okay, I'll first ask, are there any questions? Councillor Voss, and then the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of questions. Just part of the report talked about enforcement and how much enforcement, how much there is more enforcement needed regarding dogs not on leashes being walked around, and also the dog poo. I'm just wondering, what is the change, or will there be any change as a result of this information that we've gathered for additional enforcement?
Mr Cummins?
Through you, Mr Mayor. This summer we've been able to, through our summer amenity program, we've been able to increase our active patrols of the beaches to 2 a day, which has led to an increase in infringements on the beaches and in our reserves, and we intend to carry this through to next year as well.
So that's only for the summer management program, it's not for the rest of the year?
Through you, Mr Mayor, that will continue through the rest of the year. So
I'd just like to ask about the all-terrain buggy And so is that being used on our beaches outside of the summer period?
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes, it will be continued to be used throughout the year.
Councillor Simic.
Thank you, Mayor. A few of the speakers talked about the survey and how the survey was conducted. I was wondering if you'd be able to provide an overview. There was a couple of remarks. One was about data being potentially skewed towards people with who are dog owners. And there was also another remark about the time and point that the survey was taken. So I'm wondering whether you can talk to those 2 points specifically, but more broadly about the integrity of the survey, why it was conducted the way it was conducted, and whether you see any flaws in the way the survey was conducted as well.
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor. The market research company randomly selected a number of blocks within the suburbs across the city of Port Phillip. With the same number of surveys were conducted in each block with a set number of streets selected and a set number of different types of dwellings as well. The individual dwellings were approached at random by the survey staff with a single attempt made at each dwelling. If the dwelling was unattended, at the time that the staff called, the dwelling next door would be approached. This is a standard method for door-to-door surveys as it covers randomness and ensures that desired coverage across the entire municipality, including the types of dwellings. So we're talking about high-rise dwellings as well as single dwellings. There is no skew in this approach towards certain types of residents, as the residents are not being observed prior to the invitation to participate in the survey. The market research company also conducted a set number of hours surveying on site at each of the beach locations. The times and days were spread across the week, including different hours of the day, to ensure that the sample included a wide range of different people on the beach, as people vary in visiting the beach depending on the day of the week and the time of the day. Individuals on the beach were approached at random, basically as they were available, and invited them to participate. Then the survey, the residents were surveyed, or the visitors were surveyed not depending on their response, and then they moved to the next available person. So the number of people on the beach at any one time was not necessarily significant. Our staff made the approach to individuals to participate in the survey. The individuals did not actually select to participate, so it was completely random. Again, this is the standard market research approach, and the quality of the sample is reflected in the demographic profile. Naturally, different aged people had a different propensity to agree to participate. However, generally speaking, the sample was a fair representation of the visitors on the beach at the time. And interviewers attended each of the locations at varying times between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. on weekdays and weekends.
And just to follow up on that specific point raised by Ms Goldie about the results being so many of the responses coming from people who are dog owners, has that been taken into consideration in the recommendation that you've made?
Yep, through you, Mr Mayor. The beach survey results were 50% of dog owners, and the household was 38%, so we felt that that was fair and reasonable balance.
Thank you. So another item in the report that I would like to ask a question about is Eastern Reserve. Eastern Reserve is a overly popular park, which is very small and it's fenced, and that's the key reason why it's so popular. I'm just wondering, as a result of the information that came out of the survey, will there be any investigations for more fenced areas for dogs?
Through you, Mr Mayor, that's not something that we were intending to research following this survey. It wasn't an action that was identified in the recent DAMP. Council's currently in the process of developing its public space strategy, which will encompass a whole range of issues in public space. So it is possible that that is something that could be raised through that process.
I sense that that's the end of questions. I'm going to go through the slides one by one, if that's okay. Sorry. Yeah, sure.
Some of the foreshadowed motions are contradictory to existing motions. Just procedurally, normally as a councillor that puts a motion, how do you envisage for this to work?
So a foreshadow motion, in my understanding, always contradicts a substantive motion. Otherwise, we'd go for an amended motion. So I would expect that if someone has a foreshadowed motion, or if they get in first with their foreshadowed motion, then the officer's recommendation would become the foreshadowed motion. That's right, yeah. And so it's always the case that foreshadowed motions will contradict the main motion. Yes?
Mayor, can I put a motion in that instance?
Well, you've got in first. Clever boy.
Well, point of order first. I would like to, wondering if we could understand what the order is that you're proposing before we...
I'm proposing that there'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 disaggregated motions. That's my preference because it's the straightforward one, and the first one would be just noting the extensive consultation.
The Mayor, the motion I'd like to put is different.
Well,
and I
you've
know
got
that
the call. What's your motion?
So I'd like to alternate motion that was circulated amongst councillors earlier, which says that Council 3.2 retains current restrictions at South Melbourne Beach given the current satisfaction rating of off-leash areas.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I think the Mayor's, in terms of process, will go through these motion in part. So 3.1, and then after that will be 3.2 and 3.3 together, at which point you'd put the alternative motion if you're first to the microphone. Is that clear, Councillor Simic? So I think the first part is 3.1.
We need to receive that.
I'm answering Councillor Voss's question, which is what's the process. So the first part is 3.1. Through you, Mr Mayor, and then 3.2 and 3.3 come together. If you wish to move an alternative to 3.2 after we've done this first part, that would be the point at which you'd raise it.
My view, Councillor Simic, is it doesn't make sense. I'm happy to take yours first into the next one, but we need to note the extensive consultation and do that first. That's been moved by the Deputy Mayor and seconded by Councillor Bond. Are there any speakers to that?
I just want to say that obviously we acknowledge that it is quite an emotive issue in our community, and I don't know that the balance will ever be right depending on which side you view it from, but we have heard you, and so just be assured the decisions we're making are taking into all the views, and thank the officers for all the hard work involved.
Any other speakers? Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Copsey?
Yes, and just to add to Councillor Crawford's observations, in addition to all of the engagement with the consultation process and those who've come to speak tonight, there's been a lot of people who've contacted councillors over email about this. And just to add, thank you for everybody who has expressed their views throughout this whole process.
Great. Any further speakers? Move to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Is that? Did you? Yeah, that's true.
Councillor Smith.
Okay, thanks very much. I'd now like to move to 3.2, 3.3, and to be fair, Councillor Simic got in first. So, Councillor Simic, which is your foreshadowed motion, and could I ask you to read it out?
So my 3.2, the 3.2 that I'm proposing says retains current restrictions at South Melbourne Beach, given the current satisfaction rating of off-leash areas.
Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Baxter. Do you wish to speak to that, Councillor Simic?
Thank you, Mayor. And of course, noting that this has been an issue that we've been spent quite a lot of time talking to our community about. The surveys form part of the picture of information we've received. Councillor Copsey outlined that we've received many emails and phone calls from residents, including meetings with many individuals to talk about the issues involved. I believe strongly that we need to strike a balance. We've taken steps to survey our community and talk to our community. And I'd like us to see us respond appropriately and in the way that's commensurate to the wishes of our community, taking into consideration all users and not making this just about dog users versus everyone else. There's a wide variety of users, including older people, younger people, people who are recreating, and so forth. When you look at the dog off-leash foreshore regulations, you can see that from the 1st of April until the 31st of October, dog off-leash is permitted at every beach at any time, except for the small slither of Port Melbourne Corporation land. So there's a lot of time of the year when dog off-leash is permitted throughout the year. I think that the summer period is a particularly busy period for many of the beaches, and I think that, and as we've seen tonight, there's various views about how that time should be split. I think that the survey has shown, and I believe that our community will be best served if we continue our approach as it's currently been. It's received a very high satisfaction rating when it comes to local council language, and I believe is the best way forward in this instance. So I'd like to put that to councillors, and hopefully councillors can support that as well.
Thanks very much. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So I agree, obviously, with Councillor Simic. I've been uncomfortable with the process that we've engaged around this. Essentially, we did our domestic animal management plan. We did engagement with the community. We got feedback, and we came to a balanced position on that. What then happened was a petition was sent in that was had a number of errors in it, but was signed by a large amount of people. And so, based on that, we decided to review again. I think that's probably not the best way for us to be making decisions, given that we had so recently done extensive consultation on this exact issue. We've now completed that review, and the review shows that people are about as satisfied as they were when we did consultation on our domestic animal management plan. So I don't see any need for change here. As Councillor Simic said, there are, throughout most of the year, there are large areas that are available for dog off leash, and I think that we need to, this is about balance. We really do need to consider the needs of other users of the beach who feel intimidated by dogs off leash, or people who can't defend themselves, such as small children. So this is, I think, really just about coming back to the direction that we were headed in, which I think was a good direction and struck a good balance. I think we should stick with that.
Thanks very much. Councillor Voss, does anyone else wish to speak? Oh, Councillor Bond.
I'm happy to speak, though.
Go.
Thanks, since you've called me. I just wanted to clarify what Councillor Baxter said, because the initial reason for this process was to specifically address 4 actions within the DAMP, and that's the Domestic Animal Management Plan, which was done in August 2017. There were 4 actions, and this has been done, and that's what we're seeing in this report tonight. It's been backed up with the Commission Metropolis research, which was done in November and December this year, as the officers have actually, last year, as which the officers have actually just outlined, with a random mix of both dog owners and non-dog owners. And there's been a lot of anxiety. I've had 9 people contact me, anti-dog, and I've had quite a lot on the other side as well, any changes to the beach. And people are quite anxious about this because they didn't know about it. And I think it was the right way to go about this survey so that people couldn't stack one way or the other. So the way the survey was done, I think, was a right one, because it has been quite a divisive topic. I certainly would like to see a fair and balanced approach. And a trial on South Melbourne Beach, only one beach and only in the morning, a beach which I walk down every single day, or almost every single day for the last umpteen years. I know pretty much everyone that walks on that beach. And I think it's fine. I think this is not set in stone. It's about reviewing it. It's about making a decision that's going to be evidence-based, and let's see what's happened. So I think that's a fair and balanced approach going forward. So I won't be supporting this resolution.
Councillor Bond.
I also won't be supporting this resolution, and will foreshadow that I will move the original officer's recommendation in the event that this item fails to gain support from the majority of councillors, for much the same reason as outlined by Councillor Voss. Thank you.
Do we have any further? Councillor Brand.
Yes, I neither walk on the beach in the morning nor do I have a dog, so I consider myself a dognostic on this issue. But I'm trying very, very hard to understand both sides, and it is actually a really a tricky issue to balance. I absolutely get the joy that people have of running down a beach with their dog, and if the longer it can go, the better. And I accept Councillor Voss's observations on the beach. You know, it just seems like a really great thing to do. I do also understand the difficulty that people have who really feel uncomfortable with dogs or feel comfortable at having their children around dogs. It's very hard to argue with. I do think that that the detriment is often overstated, but I also think that the faith in the dog's good behaviour is often wildly delusional by owners as well. I think that the detriment that has caused people who can't go to the beach because of the dogs is probably a greater detriment than the people who have to mute their joy of not being able to run along that particular part of the beach. So that makes me favour the people who don't want the dogs on the beach. I also think that a trial is quite a good way of doing something. So I've listened to so many, I've read emails, had phone calls, and listening to councillors now, I am still listening.
Well, you're an enigma wrapped in a riddle. Are there any further contributions? Councillor Simic, could I ask you to close?
I take into account and completely respect what councillors have put and the different points of views available. I urge councillors to think about all of the different interest groups involved, as I said earlier. And the reality is that if we start trials in South Melbourne, and there's also another foreshadowed recommendation about a trial in the Botanic Gardens, we're doing things which will be divisive in the community. Our best course of action is the course of action that has the support of the majority of the people in our community, which is to keep things as they've been, and which allow off-leash walking for the majority of the year on all of our beaches already.
Thanks very much, Councillor Simic. I'll move to the vote. For the Councillor Simich's motion in relation to the retention of the current regulations. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that one. All those in favour? Councillor Copsey, Councillor Simich, Councillor Brand, Councillor Pearl and Councillor Baxter. All those against? Councillor Bond, Councillor Gross, Councillor Voss and Councillor Crawford. I declare it lost. Carried. Carried, sorry, yeah, carried. Showing my bias. Thanks very much. So now let's move on to the next slide, which is retains the current restrictions during the summer months at Port Ormond to the Rock Groyne, given the high volume in residents and visitors using the beach until sunset.
Point of order, Councillor Gross, this should be item 3.3, given we've skipped 2.
Correct. Good pickup. So there's no foreshadowed motion, I believe, on this. So does anyone wish to move it? Moved Councillor Baxter, seconded Councillor Bond. Councillor Baxter, do you wish to speak? Sure, Councillor Crawford.
I will be supporting this, but I was hoping the trial would get up so that we could see how it works in our municipality and then maybe apply it to Elwood down the track. That was my thinking. So I guess will vote for it, but it was more, I think, that it is something we still need to be open to in the future, that perhaps that we need to, this is something we need to review as time goes on. It's not in a locked-in position. When is the damp up for review again?
Any other speakers? Councillor Pearl?
I'll support those comments that Councillor Crawford's just said. I think I supported. Sorry, mate, your mistake. I did support the previous motion because I still have some questions about that, and I think there's still the feedback I got was overwhelmingly that way as well. But I think there's some improvements in my small amount of analysis I've done down in Elwood that we could possibly expand it. And to Councillor Voss's point, there's lots of areas in our municipality. I'm just looking at a map on my computer of the park on Howe Crescent, Park Street and Cecil Street. That's a corner park which is expansive, which I've never seen anyone in that park ever. And that could be used as a beautiful triangular open space dog park. So there's a number of opportunities we have in the city to expand, and we can get the balance right. So,
any further speakers? I'll speak. I'm going to be voting against this. There's something palpably different about walking on a beach with a dog than in other environments, and this particular part of the beach could have a different regulatory framework to enhance the amount of dog walking on the beach. And, you know, I don't have the numbers, so I won't be foreshadowing anything, but I think it's important that we send a message that it's not unanimous, that and in the future the current restrictions should be open to some sort of deregulation. Councillor Voss?
I'll also be voting against this. I also agree with you, Mayor, that in particular in the morning, and it really would be only in the morning that I would consider this in summer, because any other time of the day there are far too many people about of different abilities to not consider it. But in the morning, I'm talking very early in the morning, up till say 9 o'clock, that would be appropriate to have dogs on the beach. without a leash. But I think this is a very good spot for it as well, although I note the officer's recommendation here, and that's not to do it, and I don't think that'll get up either. But look, I'll foreshadow that in the event that it's lost, that I'll put an alternative.
Thanks very much. Councillor Copsey?
I just wish to ask a clarifying question then, because I'm looking at our current restrictions, and I understood that this refers to the area of the beach where it is permissible to have dogs off leash between 5:30am and 9:30am in the morning during summer, and off leash at all times the rest of the year. So this refers to the area where there is current off leash in the morning. Can officers clarify?
Point of order. We can't ask clarifying questions once debate has commenced under section 13.1.
That is correct.
Well, then I'll take it as my opportunity to speak and say that that is my understanding of the map, and so this actually maintains the ability for residents to have dogs off leash in the early hours of the morning on a part of Elwood Beach.
Thanks very much for that contribution, Councillor Copsey. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded, and there's been speeches. Is there any other speakers? I'll now go to sorry, Councillor Brand.
Well, I am confused now, but and I don't understand I don't understand also why there wouldn't be a trial attempted here, because it does sound to me. Okay, well, I've fallen into the same trap. If it's got dogs all year round, I am not unhappy at all. Okay, let's move. Do you wish to close, Councillor Baxter? You moved it, didn't you?
I would look. I would just say that I understand the standing orders, but it does seem that some councillors are a little bit confused about what the existing restrictions are. I didn't say you were. Councillor Brand specifically said he was confused about the restrictions.
Are you speaking to close?
No, yeah, I'm just closing. So I do just want to say that that's a little bit unnerving, I suppose, as we go into a vote.
Councillor Pearl was right on his interpretation of the rules.
And I'm right that your microphone's on.
Councillor Pearl was right with his interpretation of the rules. End of story.
Thank you. I just wanted that on the official record.
Okay, let's move to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare the motion carried.
Next.
Division required.
Division's been required, and let's go to the vote. All those in favour, Councillors Copsey, Simic, Bond, Baxter and Pearl. All those against? Don't talk, just vote. Brand, Gross, Voss and Crawford. Sorry. 3.4. So 3.4 is the old 3.5, which is to retain the current dog-on-leash zones located in the lawn area in the southwest corner of the St Kilda Botanic Gardens. That's been moved, Councillor Crawford. Seconded, Councillor Bond. I'm going to foreshadow a different resolution. And I'm also going to foreshadow that I'm going to be speaking to a little PowerPoint, which is almost ready to rock and roll when it's... Okay. So who moved it? Sorry. Councillor Crawford.
I do think in the balance of people and dogs off leash, the St Kilda Botanical Gardens is a different ballpark to the beach and our open parks. We have a responsibility of various biodiversity there, whether it be plants or animal species. And I think that the higher protection needs to go to that gardens which is actually nominated to be a botanical garden. So it is actually not the place where dogs can roam free and possibly kill little lizards or dig plants unintentionally or whatever. Now, I know that Councillor or the Mayor will indicate that dogs are off leash there already. Well, that's a policing matter for us to get that back on track. That's not a reason to expose the gardens to further dogs off leash. I think the balance here, it's actually not designed to be one of those open parks where there's lots of open space for dogs to roam free. Plenty of those exist, as we've just discussed, both in our beaches and many of our parks in the area are off leash all the time. So that's why I am in support of keeping it as it is.
Thanks very much, Madam Deputy Mayor. Sorry, who's seconded? Bondi. Councillor Bondi.
Yes, agree with Councillor Crawford. You've got Peanut Farm's about 2 blocks away, Moran Reserve's about 4 blocks away. There are off-leash areas all day located very near this location. As the name says, it's a botanical garden. It's for plants and the ornamental pond and all of that sort of activity, not for a dog off-leash area. We've got dog off-leash areas elsewhere, but this is the one botanical gardens we have in Port Phillip that's for plants, and I support keeping it that way.
Councillor Baxter?
So I also will be supporting this motion for the same reasons as the mover and seconder. But I did just want to refer to, what Councillor Pearl was saying before about, us perhaps proactively looking into more spaces, fenced off parks and that sort of thing. This is not one of those places. I really feel that for the same reasons that Councillor Crawford said, botanic gardens, they're places for very, very sensitive flora and fauna. I kind of think having dogs in there at all is kind of like a little bit, iffy, but I understand that it is a really nice place to walk your dog, but have it on a leash, and I think that we wouldn't really have any issues. Now, I understand as well that Councillor Crawford rather cruelly preempted your presentation to talk about the civil disobedience thing, and I would say that that's probably more of an enforcement issue than anything else.
Okay, I'll speak. If I could put up my... Well, tonight's been a very disappointing night for dog owners and walkers. And I just wanted to talk about some of the ideas that occurred to me in relation to the St Kilda Botanic Gardens. So if we could have the nextie. So this is a popular wish in the community. There's a need for partial deregulation, and several petitions have been collected, and often they never make it to council because they get petitioner fatigue. Let's look at the first one, which I dragged from online. This had 88 supporters from everywhere, from as far away as Brighton, Elwood and Korea. The shaded blue area is the suggested area for a morning dog walk. I think it's very important that they have to be on leash during the evening or afternoon, even though in winter it's virtually abandoned. This is a very special place and very popular, and you have to respect that. But this area shaded in blue, not the ornamental lake, but the area to the southwest, that's basically the Australian plantings and grass. And it's perfect for dog off leash. It's a place where it could, there's all this sort of talk about lizards and skinks and other things that are going to be killed. I've never seen any of them killed in this area. I've never seen them in this area, and I've been walking there for 30 years. So let's move to the next one. This is a dog off-leash petition that was collected by my daughter. I don't have a conflict of interest because it was never lodged with the council because she got petitioner fatigue and her father got onto the council. So there's no conflict, but it does show that there is a considerable number of people who are happy to sign a petition, whatever that means, about access to dog off-leash in that particular corner of the park. So please don't think this is a frolic of my own, that there is objective evidence that a lot of people want it to happen. So, the civil disobedience. We talk quite blithely tonight about civil disobedience. I think it is quite corrosive for this council. We are an enforcement authority. And for us to talk blithely about the fact that our laws are largely observed in the breach is disappointing to me, and I don't see that it is actually a matter for mirth. It undermines the faith in and respect for this council as an entity, and it's jurisprudentially the wrong way to deal with this. By jurisprudence, I talk about the interaction between law and society. And I give this frivolous example in a rugby line-out. There used to be a lot of cheating going on where people would lift each other. So for 40 years they tried banning it and the bans failed. So then they made it a feature of the game and now they lift up and it's quite spectacular. So laws have to try and, I'm a consequentialist, you look at the consequences, what are you going to get out of it? And the second jurisprudential issue is, how do you manage dog owners? How do you maximise the best way? And you get that through dialogue. Excuse me. And I talk about the Alma Dogs. Alma Dogs was an organisation that would talk quite sternly about 15 years ago with dog owners about picking up poo, would organise Alma Park clean-up days, was incredibly responsible and talked about responsible dog ownership. And that occurred in an issue where people were allowed to walk off lead and there was trust, community and communication. So we lose that when we criminalise people. So this is a situation at 6:30 to 7 a.m. this morning. The civil disobedience close to 100%. These people who walk here, we say go to other parks, but these are time-poor workers who have to resort to the nearest park. They would rather risk a fine than schlep to another park, and these photos document this. None of these are my dog. There is a dog belonging to a very close relative of mine, and I love that dog on the left. I figure I can't lose. You show a picture of a dog, you can sell anything from toilet paper to controversial ideas. And, you know, look at the dogs embracing each other. It's just lovely. But it's criminal. So we were spoken to in a paper about the grass Armageddon, where these few little doggies are going to destroy the grass. I think that Eastern Reserve is an interesting but initially a poor analogy because it's very small in a highly dense area of living. And this is a zero-sum game for council because I think that the ones that come and walk off leash will migrate from the peanut farm. So really, if there's this grass Armageddon, then it's either going to be in the peanut farm or that section of the Bott Gardens. So, you know, there's been a degree of alarmism about the budgetary implications, and that's a tried and trusted way of killing off innovation and new ideas. But what really annoys me about the grass Armageddon argument is this is what we do. We provide assets for people to use, and if there's increased damage to that asset, then we think, well, fantastic, people are using our assets. And so, in one sense, Eastern Reserve is a great analogy because it says this, we put up a fence and it becomes incredibly popular with dog owners. So, when women's footy increased damage of grass over the winter, we welcomed that fact, and we're looking at new technology to enable more increased use of our grass areas, getting the new technology in weaves, and I think that it's a great thing that we are threatened with the grass costing us $40,000 extra. If you think, though, that those few doggies we saw in the photos are going to actually cause $40,000 worth of damage, then you're a more gullible man than I am, Gunga Din. The next one. So in the conclusion, there's a long-term requirement for time-poor people to walk their dogs in the gardens. And as I say, tonight has been a bad night for dog walkers. And I understand that this is more controversial than some of the other things that we knock back. This demand has been evidenced by petitions, and these petitions bob up all the time. This demand for walking space has been evidenced by civil disobedience. I've got a photo tonight where there's 9 dogs off lead. We're criminalising these people who are doing something that's quite understandable. And if we worked with them and took it to the morning by legitimising it in the morning, we'd take them off the criminal register and we would increase the safety for those people who find dogs terrifying, which is, I think, a good thing. So the civil disobedience brings council into disrepute. It fails to deliver recreational outcomes for residents in an increasingly dense area, and a short trial is absolutely justified without the provision of $40,000 in the budget for grass Armageddon. Councillor Simic.
I'm kind of lost for words after that. That was very entertaining and unprecedented, I'd say. Look, I've got
Thanks, Councillor Simic.
I have to say that to respond. I mean, I don't think it's been a bad night for dog owners. I think that's a really unfair thing to say. We've conducted a very thorough review into areas that are available to dog owners for off-leash walking. There's areas throughout a municipality that are available for dog owners for on-lead walking. So there's so many opportunities for dog owners. I have total and utter respect for dog owners and want to make sure that every possible opportunity is explored. But the Botanic Gardens are not a place for a dog park. That's the reality, given the unique flora and fauna that's available there. To contradict what you're saying, Mayor, as well, I did walk through the Botanic Gardens recently and see a possum that had been ripped apart by another animal. I don't know if it was a dog or if it was what had happened, but I did see that myself, and I spoke to staff at the Eco Centre about it as well. I haven't never been contacted by anyone in our community about this proposal. I'm not sure if other councillors have, but I think it's not true to say that this is a popular proposal in our community, because it hasn't come up before. So, Mayor, while I thank you for your presentation, this won't be something I'll be supporting in the Botanic Gardens tonight.
Thanks, Councillor Simic. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Pearl.
I'll support you on this one, Councillor Gross. I think we can do something there. So you've won one vote tonight. You probably won't hear any more. But I didn't flip my vote on the Elwood vote, and there's nothing to do with this one, but I just wanted to say why, because I was tempted to do so, but I didn't think it was fair, because I didn't feel like Councillor Brand really had made his conviction mind up, and I didn't want to go into a situation where we went into motion Armageddon and couldn't come out with clear direction to our officers, which is worse. So I'm a bit more fluid on Elwood, and I think I'm happy to consider something in this area on a trial basis. It's a sacred site for our community in many respects. It's highly respected, and there's a lot of delicate areas in it, but I think we can manage those things. So I'll support you on this one, Councillor Gross, and vote against the motion.
Thanks very much, Councillor Pearl. Yep, could you please close, Councillor Crawford?
So I note that later we are putting out our draft budget for the next year for consultation. And I also note that there are so many items that are not included on it. I also note that the cost of delivering all the range of wonderful services and parks and facilities that we do in this municipality continues to increase, and we have a rate cap. So while $40,000 might not sound a lot for one little park, when you consider the number of parks we have across the board, we can't, and with drought hitting, we may have all noticed how dry our community is, and we need to look at how do we water, given that we are going to get less rain. There are some really serious things that we have to consider around our parks and green spaces, like climate realities for the kind of places that we love. Are coming home to roost this summer, we saw. So I think that we do need to retain certain areas, given that there will be increased conditions on them, like heat and lack of water. We have plenty of spaces for dogs, and this is about balance. I also am going to throw out the maybe controversial view that perhaps if you have a dog, it is considerate to, and you don't want to work farther, you might consider where you live in the municipality if you're time poor, because there are some realities about areas that we need to protect, and the botanical gardens is one of them. So unfortunately, we don't have a bottomless pit. This is an area put aside specifically for plants and wildlife, and dogs can visit on leash, and we're more than happy for them to do so, but there comes a time where you have to delineate, and this is one of them where, for many reasons, I hope that the fellow councillors will be supporting my bid to keep the dogs on lead and not off leash in the botanical gardens.
Thanks very much, Councillor Crawford. I'll now move to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Thanks very much, Councillor Pearl. I declare the motion carried. And now if I can move on to the last one, which is about retention of the current restrictions at Sandwich, Middle Park, New Beach, West Beach, Port Melbourne Beach, St Kilda Beach and Elwood Beach. Councillor Copsey? Move, Councillor Copsey. Oh, sorry? Seconded, Councillor Voss. Oh, so it's been moved. Seconded. Do we have a seconder? Oh, you were. Oh, sorry. I have received. Okay, seconded. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Copsey? Councillor Voss.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say, first of all, thanks to everyone that's come out tonight on both sides of the debate. And while I've been, I'm quite disappointed with the outcome of the South Melbourne Beach trial in the morning, I am very supportive of this last item. I do think that we should retain the current restrictions on all of these beaches. I wanted to just reiterate a couple of points I made in terms of my questions earlier, and that is about our parks, which are not discussed in this particular motion, but I will take the opportunity to talk about how many of them are over-popular, such as Eastern Reserve due to it being fenced, and I would really like to see the open space plan, when appropriate, look to places that it may be appropriate for dogs off leash with a fence. In terms of enforcement, regarding dogs off leash and also the significant amount of dog poo on footpaths, on nature strips and things, I specifically would like to see more enforcement of owners and requests for dogs to be put on leash when walking around the streets and the shops. I'm an owner of 2 dogs. I love them dearly, but I do see this as a problem everywhere, and it is something that people speak to me all the time very freely, I think because I am, a dog owner. I would like to see more enforcement and patrols to encourage people to pick up after their dogs. And I think the way we could do that is to be very visual with our all-terrain buggy. I don't see it. I've never seen it except for the day it was launched. And I'm around all the time, and that doesn't mean it's not out there, but I would really like to see that, just patrolling down Bay Street, patrolling down wherever, the main streets. It should be quite visible, and that should send a big warning. And also just to let our community know that we're actually out there doing our job. And I know you guys work really hard, but it'd be great to be able to see it. There's really poor behaviour early in the mornings and late at nights around, especially around apartments, and especially when it's raining. I know when this happens, and I'm talking about just dogs going out there and relieving themselves. So I'm really keen to understand how the Animal Management Unit will address these areas of concern, and it certainly came out in this survey. I'd also like us to look at dog registrations. Anecdotally, I hear often that, while we have 6,772 dogs registered, anecdotally I hear that many aren't. I don't have any evidence behind that, but I would like to see a little bit of a campaign around that. That's probably all I wanted to say, but I am supportive of this final recommendation. Thank you.
Any further speakers? Now move to the... Oh, do you wish to close, Councillor Copsey? Now move to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried. Thanks very much. That's a dog one. Let's go back to the Elster Creek one. Councillors, we have 11.1, Elster Creek Catchment 2018 Action Plan, January to March 2019 update. Excuse me, Helen Halliday. No, I cough, that's me.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, councillors. My name is Helen Halliday. I live in Balaclava. First of all, congratulations to you, Mr Mayor, for winning such a fabulous award.
It's amazing.
And to the council officers. A wonderful...
That's just added 30 seconds to your time.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, that's all good.
I have already forewarned them, so hopefully they will be able to at least understand where I'm coming from. In relation to Alstonwick Park, I would like to point out that some of the issues that have surrounded the way in which the rollout of that park is happening has been detrimental. We all know what happened to Oval 2. There is absolutely no reason why that oval couldn't have been shifted and multi-purposed. We lost that because of particular interests that were not taken into account. We're almost at the same point of losing some of the opportunities that exist in the reserve area to use it for flood mitigation, based on some what appear to be fallacious ideas about where water should go and where it should flow, and what trees should be preserved and what should not be preserved. These are all issues that could have been resolved by better discussion between the community and the officers and the council. A second issue is more broadly looking at the catchment. More generally, 70% of the catchment is in the city of Glenara. If the city of Glenara were able to use permeability as its major focus, those issues would be resolved. City of Glenara has no water-sensitive urban design requirements for private space and apparently has no intention of applying it in public open space. I think that we need to be really careful at this stage of the way in which this action plan is going to roll out. There are many interests in play. I believe that the issue that needs to be addressed is how we can apply water-sensitive urban design principles more broadly, particularly in relation to streets and laneways and car parks, as is proposed in the cloudburst recommendation for Fisherman's Bend, which is one of the reasons why this council got that award. So my suggestion is, and past suggestion, is that there should be some information provided to all the people that are involved in these decisions about how the new water-sensitive urban design principles could be applied across the catchment. Similarly, in relation to the best practice environmental management guidelines, which are also being considered, if they were applied, and if they were applied to roads, then all the councils would have to do quite a lot more than they are currently doing about making sure that all their roads and footpaths are made as permeable as possible, especially where they're used just for car parking. Finally, we have proposed, and I believe that it would be a good idea, that there be a flattened structure, and that instead of having lots of different people meeting separately, that the mayors or senior officers, including CEOs, meet with the community and the senior officers to make decisions in a similar way as to how Fisherman's Bend Advisory Committee operated, which was highly successful because it allowed an open interchange of ideas. I hope those ideas would be put into the next stage of the action plan. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks very much, Ms Halliday. Councillors, questions, or does someone want to take up some of Ms Halliday's issues? Councillor Crawford?
I would like to take up some of Ms Halliday's questions, particularly the one around with Glen Ira. Has there been discussion at either the Mayor's forums or the CEO or officer level around the kind of permeability upstream? And is that, I guess, an ongoing thrust of the kind of conversations we're having with them?
Sorry? Mr Walters and Mr Graffin? Sorry? Oh, yeah. Thanks, Helen. Well,
you're right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr.
Through you, Mr Mayor. So the question relates, sorry, just so I'm clear, about how we are advocating for permeability towards...
Well, I guess, as Ms Halliday said, around particularly, like a lot of it is upstream and Glen Ira's under their authority. Have they been open to the idea of catching more of it in their municipality through permeability? Is that an idea that is currently being discussed?
Through you, Mr Mayor. So one part of the output from the first iteration of the action plan was an in-depth sort of review of the policy and planning frameworks within the catchment. Glen Ira commissioned that piece of work, and their involvement in the collaboration is an opportunity for us to share information and learnings. We're currently undertaking the development of permeability, information and hopefully targets, and then I guess the hope would be that we could then share what we have with them and try and influence, I guess, their approach towards that in the future.
I just can't think off the top of my head. Is there, in that review that I read from Glen Ira around planning and the various application of water sensitivity, is there legislative requirement at a state level that they be considerate of downstream flows from any new planning approvals, or that's not yet That's the kind of recommendation that they made in that report. Sorry, I know I'm going a bit left field.
Through you, Mr Mayor, it's a planning, strategic planning is a fairly complex area that we've received some advice on, so I'll qualify my answer now with the statement that I'm not a strategic planner. But there's various instruments used to inform planning decisions. I think your question was around residential subdivision development and whether if there's a requirement for permeability and, yeah, considering downstream. So it might be best to take that on notice to give you a proper detailed answer, but there are certainly instruments. The state planning policy calls for. There's another thing called the state environment, the set for waters for Victoria, which calls up the BEPM, the best practice and environmental management guidelines. The EPA administers those guidelines, and DELP and the EPA have an action in the review of the State Environment Protection Policy to review those guidelines. So the way they apply is likely to change, and that's work in progress at the moment. The Environment Protection Amendment Act is also changing the way the EPA operates, and they're developing new environmental reference standards that pick up the waters matters as well. So there is some change in that space. It currently does not apply, and this is to Ms Halliday's point, the requirements around WUSD are aimed at residential development, essentially your development of land that doesn't currently include road development. So one of the pieces of information that Ms Halliday provided there was for calling for consideration of applying those WUSD provisions to a broader range of construction types. So we'll take the information she's provided to us.
Sorry, I think we're moving away from the issue. Let's ask, are there any questions on the actual Elster Creek Catchment Action Plan? Sorry, Mr Walters. Okay, resolutions. Do we have a mover? Okay, I'm going to move it if you're not quick. I'll move it. Seconded, Councillor Copsey. Do you wish to say anything, Councillor Gross? No. Councillor Copsey?
There's some very important work going on around the Elster Creek catchment. I take on board the comments by Ms Halliday around how, in your view, continued engagement with the community can be facilitated through the processes we have underway, and I'll take that up with officers. But the reason we are receiving these action plan updates is so that we can keep a transparent line of information to the community around what is happening in this very important part of our city, with big ramifications not only around flooding and safety, but also some really positive outcomes that can come from being proactive about working with our neighbouring councils on the catchment management. So I'm very happy to accept this.
Councillor Baxter?
Yeah, look, I just wanted to talk about often in these reports it certainly talks about some of the really exciting and positive things that we're seeing going forward, and I think that it's really good to make sure that we're reporting on these things and keeping it transparent. And I know that there's lots of really good work there, but I also just did want to acknowledge that there are significant risks that we need to, which this certainly action plan certainly talks about risks as well. But the risks that we need to navigate are real, and we need to be really forthright with our community about those as well, because I worry about giving too rosy an impression of what we can pull off, because as Ms Halliday was talking about, there have been opportunities in the past that have been lost, and so we want to seize every opportunity and really just make sure that those risks are properly managed. But I'm very pleased with how we've been going so far, despite some of the missed opportunities, which I think are don't really have anything to do with our offices, to be honest. But yeah.
Okay. Any further? I'll now ask the mover if he wants to close. Do you want to close, Mr. Gross? No, I don't. I'll move to the vote. All those in favour? Unanimous. Sorry, thanks very much. We now move to agenda item 12.2. We have two speakers, which is the St Kilda Marina Project Stage 3 Community Engagement Report. We have two speakers on that. Jenya Kavatsky. Could I ask you to read your name into the record and your suburb, please?
My name is Jenny Kavatsky. I live in St Kilda West, 40-year resident of St Kilda. Couple of observations, I think. First, one is this is the first time after living 40 years in the suburb, this is the first time that I've actually participated or been witness to council meetings, and it's quite impressive. So, I think I'll as I understand, I can watch it online, so maybe you won't see the last of me, despite my exhaustion today. The second observation is that there's only two speakers speaking about the St Kilda Marina project, which is once in a 50-year redevelopment, as opposed to I don't know how many speakers and supporters for the dog issues on either side. It's quite interesting. Hopefully they'll apply the same passion to this development. Look, so I was one of the participants. I was one of the participants on the community panel when this marina project was developed, I guess, or started to some of the issues explored. The reason why I'm here is that I want to register my concern with the with this plan, with the council's plan to turn the area currently occupied by the car park and the petrol station into a two-storey car park and shops. So effectively, a shopping centre on the beach that's 12 to 15 metres high, effectively covering that whole area next to the marina. I also want to stress that this design was forced onto the panel very early in the process, and that despite the frequent requests from the majority of the panel for alternative designs, none were submitted. In fact, the design for this effectively a Chadston on the beach was submitted to us as the preferred option. It was labelled as such, and it's in your documentation as such. This is problematic and distressing for two reasons. The first is that area is will be needlessly commercialised at the cost of amenity and views of that area. It's also another reason why it's problematic and distressing is that the project will be strenuously opposed by the local community as soon as they realise what is happening. This will be a repeat of the St Kilda Triangle experience that the Mayor knows well, with similar sort of impacts on the costs, the legal costs to the council, the costs incurred because of the delays to the development, and so it needs to be rethought. I just want to be absolutely clear, I'm not against the marina redevelopment. I think there needs to be a functioning marina on that site. That's clearly what the area has now been used for the last 50 years. I don't believe that the community will accept a shopping centre in that area. This area will not be, once developed, this area will not be touched for another 50 years, which means that it's a multi-generational legacy that we're going to leave to our children and our grandchildren. So we need more imagination as to what we can do with that site without turning it into a shopping centre. Can
you finish up now, please? Your 3 minutes is over.
Okay. So the reason why I'm here is to raise this issue formally in front of you. I've already raised it in writing, as you know, to all of you. I'm unhappy with the answer that the CEO gave me, but unfortunately I've been too busy to formally respond to this, but I will, and I apologise for that. But I believe that you as a council have responsibility to the generations to come to think long and hard about this.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Oh, Councillor Bond wants to ask you a question.
Just a question. Where in the proposal do you get the impression there's a shopping centre going in? Because it's pretty clear to me there's no shopping centre in there.
Sure. The final documents that were put together in almost a panic situation when they realised that, at least the plurality...
Sorry, could I ask you to answer the question? Where in the proposal do you see a shopping centre?
That was glossed over. If you see that the documents that were submitted by the designers for us to vote on, all the numbers associated with that are in the report are all based on the shopping centre design. And you should have documentation, or at least your project team would have the documentation detailing the shopping centre as a proposed solution.
Councillor Pearl?
And I'm happy to send you copies if you like. More than happy to send you the copies of this.
It's very important, because if a proposal's been put in front of you indicating a shopping centre has been put there, that proposal hasn't been put to councillors. So we need evidence that our officers have presented you with a shopping centre proposal, which is not acceptable to me, and I'd like to see the evidence. So could you please provide us with the evidence? It's very important.
I will email it tomorrow morning.
Councillor Brand?
Can I just get a small clarification? Are you saying that the figures, the square meterage and the figures that are being used don't actually match the drawing, that don't actually match the drawings that have been presented?
I have to say I haven't seen the drawings in a couple of months, so I don't know what's in the current version that's in front of you today, but all the numbers that I remember seeing were based on that shopping centre proposal that were then, once it became clear that the plurality of the panel was unhappy with that design, it was removed from the visual displays, but certainly maintained in the underlying thesis.
Councillor Crawford?
Can I clarify with officers? I think that there's a difference between, there's suggested what you could do where you could arrange parking, but that's very different. That's a layout. And also I'd like to clarify, there's actually no view given that the petrol station is there anyway, so it's not like there's a taken away view. So can I clarify those two things? There's no view currently in that spot, and really it's not for the officers. And there's no design as such, just indicated blocks where things could be arranged for extra. Yeah. Oh no, is that not? Can I clarify? That's a question.
Okay. Thanks very much, Mr. Shabursky. Now we can take questions of the officers. But I want to just... I'm going to take that question now, please. So it was in about view preservation or view and the BP service station. What else was it, Councillor Crawford?
Yeah, so there's no view currently, given that the BP station exists there, and the land slopes up, from my understanding. But I want to check that. But two, there's no actual design given. The only information that we've been given is possible designated areas where things could, extra space could be, collated.
Through you, Mayor, for the first question, is there a view where the petrol station is now? No, and that to the second question, there isn't a design proposed for the site. There are just areas where we will be recommending to Council as part of a site brief that will come to Council, which is based on the work that was done through the community panel, areas where building is appropriate and areas where building is not appropriate. Tonight we aren't asking for a decision from Council, we're just simply noting the work that has been done and through the community panel and also the wider community consultation.
Thanks very much. I'll move to the second question. Second speaker, Peter Tanner. Could I ask you to read your name and suburb into the record, please?
Peter Tanner, St Kilda. I live in Marine Parade, so I'm very close to the marina. I see it every day. It's very important to me. I was one of 23 members of the community panel, the St Kilda Marina panel. I believe the panel was a good representation of the community in general. As such, the majority views of the panel, as contained in the engagement report, should receive significant consideration. I believe that there are 6 critical issues that received majority support by the community panel. Those 6 issues are: number 1, the bridge from the west side to the east side over the channel. Number 2, the boat shed size and the footprint of that boat shed. Number 3, the external perimeter fence removal. Number 4, the car parking for boats location and the boat launching area location. Number 5, the commercial uses at the southern end of the marina, which I don't believe what I saw during the panel sessions. It was envisaged that a supermarket be part of the development, so I don't agree that it was that site was going to end up a mini Chadstone. There was no supermarket there, and there was very little shopping there. And 6, the Beacon Park creation is the final of the 6 critical issues that all received majority views of the panel, and they should, I believe, as a representative panel, should receive significant consideration if they're overturned. There was one issue that wasn't included in the engagement report that I believe should have been, and that's the area behind the skate park at the northern eastern end of the marina, which is a large area which contains a dual bitumen road that goes to a dead-end area, goes nowhere. I believe that area didn't receive the consideration that it should have as to what its future will be in the new marina. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Peter. Do you have to? Okay, quick. Sorry,
Mr. Tanner.
I'll allow this.
I just wanted to ask the area you've characterised as the bitumen road behind the skate park.
That's
is
right.
That inside the current fence of the marina at the moment?
Yes, it's in the marina. Yeah.
Yeah, it goes along. It's got palm trees on the skate park side.
That's right. Yeah. It's big 200 yards. It's a lengthy road.
Good. Thanks.
Near those dwarf palms. No questions. Sorry, Jenya. No. No. You get one chance. You've had it. Councillors, any questions? Okay, are there any resolutions? Move Councillor Voss, seconded Councillor Bond, the officer's rec. Do you wish to speak? Councillor Bond?
Yes, what we're doing tonight is making public the views of the community in the form of a feedback document. Not everything in the document I agree with, but all we're doing now is making it public. Let the community have a look at it, and we'll take this opportunity to get feedback from the community the wider community, not just the community group, on what's in there, and hopefully people will give us some really good information about what they do and don't want to see on this site within the rough parameters of what it is we're putting out to consultation here. So thank you for those that participated in the community panel and the officers for all the work we've done on this project to date.
Councillor Simic?
I just wanted to speak on the community panel process and thank officers for taking us down that process, because it is something that I was very keen to trial when it comes to this proposal. And I think at the start of it we weren't exactly sure how the design of it's going to work, and officers spent a lot of time working with the consultants to develop a process that's appropriate to this project itself. What we got in the end was list of recommendations from the panel, and a very clear expression that not all of the proposals received majority support, but very clearly what the level of support for each of the proposals was. I think that it's a good example of where we've engaged with the community on an important project effectively, and I note, though, that there are a few people who aren't quite satisfied with the process and its totality. I'm muddling up my words, I apologise. But hopefully we can take that feedback on and improve these processes in future, because community consultation needs to happen properly. And we need to continue to improve, and I think that this was a good step in the right direction. So thank you to everyone who participated in the process, and I look forward to seeing what we get back from the community and how this project progresses from here.
And both of them for coming out.
Yeah.
Councillors? Okay, I will speak. Mr. Kavatsky, I have to say that was the most misleading hyperbole I've heard in this chamber. For a plan to be described when it isn't a plan but a series of objectives as Chadstone by the Bay is absurd. I much prefer Mr. Tanner's careful analysis of the 6 major issues that were discussed. I've used that phrase, Chadstone by the Bay. It's now in relation to Mr. Holland's sea baths, and I don't know if you've ever been to Chadstone. It's nothing like Chadstone, and it's quite unfair, quite misleading, and given that it's not actually a plan, it's...
I'm sorry, Mayor, but 10 years ago you tried to get the Kilda Triangle. You're trying to take your seat.
Could you please take your seat? You're out of order. You get one go, and that's it. And I'm replying to your... because it was quite misleading, and I'm going to...
I will send you the plans. There was nothing misleading about it.
Okay, we've got the plans now. I don't care...
Mr Mayor, can you just ask him to take his...
Point of order, please, Mayor.
Yeah.
We have a process, and the community is not honouring that process.
Thank you very much. So, sorry to speak so harshly, but it is quite important that when a process as slow and considered as this, and as careful and as measured as this, is not going to be subject to the slings and arrows of political hyperbole that are not accurate without me putting my foot down and saying that this is unacceptable. I welcome them. Do you wish... who moved it? Councillor Voss, do you wish to close? Now move to the vote. All those in favour? Declared carried unanimously. Thanks very much. 14.1, Council Plan and Budget 2019 to 20, release of draft document for public consultation. April Seymour. By the way, councillors, we're going to keep on. We've only got 3 speakers, and then so I thought we'd power on through rather than delay them. Ms. Seymour, could I ask you to read your name and suburb into the...
Absolutely. My name is April Seymour. I'm a resident of East St Kilda. Tonight I'm speaking as the Executive Officer of the Eco Centre in St Kilda.
Thanks very much.
Regarding attachment 2 to this agenda item. The Port Phillip Eco Centre is a community-managed, non-partisan and not-for-profit environment centre serving residents, businesses, schools and organisations in our local region. We work with people of all backgrounds, from early years through to seniors. We serve 87,000 users per year, including 20,000 program participants, 67,000 users of our information services via phone, email, walk-ins, events and online resources, and 3,869 volunteers last year. We're known for education, citizen science, and hands-on projects to protect wildlife and waterways, reduce emissions and waste, and strengthen our community. We're proud partners of City of Port Phillip since 1999. For every $1 invested by the City of Port Phillip in the Eco Centre programs, we raise $3 and provide $14 of economic value to the region, before considering environmental impact benefits. However, a 2018 financial review as part of Eco Centre strategic planning demonstrated that our current funding agreement covers just over half of the delivery costs for our council service partnership. That funding agreement was developed back in 2004. This has created a dependency on cross-subsidy through grants and unsustainable volunteering. Due to population growth and increasing community concern around climate change and really exciting interest in taking positive action in response, all of our unique services, programs, and venue are oversubscribed. For example, a youth volunteering program on the foreshores of this council targeted 200 volunteers aged 12 to 25, and we had 1,540 young people participate. Last year, we attempted to cap our volunteer hours to ensure we can actually support each of those volunteers appropriately, but due to delightful increases in our retention and return participation, we still accidentally grew 50%, and we had the equivalent of 8 full-time equivalent staff in the volunteer hours, around over 16,000 volunteer hours, primarily on City of Port Phillip landscapes. The Eco Centre is matchlessly cost-effective. We're strategic. We manage on very lean costs and serve you below market rates, achieve a 99.7% user satisfaction. Our work is recognized ranging from the Premier's Sustainability Awards through to recent feedback from an 8-year-old participant on an excursion overheard, declaring this was the absolute best day of his life, other than his birthday. So for the aforementioned reasons, councillors, we request again that council increase our funding agreement for 2019 to 2024 from $243,000 this financial year to $408,000 per annum. On behalf of the Port Phillip people and landscapes, thank you in advance for your consideration.
Sorry, thanks very much. Campbell Spence. Sorry to keep you waiting.
Thank you, Mayor, councillors and officers. I'm Campbell Spence, Middle Park, and I represent the ratepayers of Port Phillip Incorporated. We're a group of people who object to the cost of rates and the unsustainable increase in rates year on year. We're concerned about the proposed increases in rate revenue of $4 million in the 2019-20 budget year. We have nearly 500 members, and our committee members will continue to attend these meetings in efforts to highlight wasteful expenditure by this council. And we expect our numbers to grow. Rates are having a major impact on the community's costs of living and when wages are not growing. We believe rate increases are not justified by this city. When spending is already not required by the residents and ratepayers, and there is no statutory obligation to provide some of the services that you're currently providing. We would like to remind the councillors of their statutory duty to represent the residents and community, because we can't see how spending of unwanted and unjustified services benefit the community. We recommend that the councillors do not accept the draft budget papers and send it back to the officers to find cost savings of $4 million to keep the rate rises flat for the 2019-20 year. Examples are, we think the council is spending too much, you have too many employees, your labour costs are $96 million, as compared to comparative councils which have fewer employees and lower labour costs. Why are you spending 4 times the cost of road sealing than the average council in Victoria and double comparative rate costs? We believe you're paying too much to contractors. There are efficiency gains in the budget papers of $2.2 million. We don't think these go far enough. And to this extent, we propose the following. In relation to childcare, Mayor Gross, at a recent meeting in April, read from the officer's papers on childcare, which indicated that the increasing costs of providing childcare are not sustainable under the current service model. The ratepayers of Port Phillip support the option to move to a more financially sustainable model where the council ceases operating council-run childcare and transitions to community-run and not-for-profit providers. Our members have children at these at council-run and not-for-profits, and we believe that the council can save $2 million without reducing the quality of childcare. In addition, Mayor Gross pointed out that the closure of the council-run centres would save the council $2.6 million in capital investment that's required to upgrade ageing childcare facilities. Another area of the budget, and I'm coming to the end, ironically in the budget papers there's an item, our commitments to you. The budget papers have allocated $22.3 million to improve customer service, $10 million in the 19-20 year. We believe this cost is not justified on the basis of the budget papers, which indicate 4.1% of people surveyed use customer services, and only 11.8% of customer service is important to them. So why spend all that money when your survey indicates customer service is not important? Also, moving along, there's $4 million budgeted on people, culture and capability, $10 million on technology in the 19-20 year. These items total $24 million. If you really want to demonstrate your commitments to the community, then you should eliminate these costs. To conclude, we recommend that budget be sent back to the officers to find at least $4 million in cost savings and stop imposing unjustified tax increases on the community when the cost of living is a major issue in this city. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Campbell. Councillor Simic.
Thank you for your presentation. Is childcare the only service you propose we cut, or are there other services that you think council should cut? You mentioned that there's a range of services that you believe council should not be involved in. I'm just wondering if childcare is the only
There are many
service.
others, but my 3 minutes doesn't allow me to mention these. We have issues around Fisherman's Bend, and we will present those in a submission to the council. And hopefully we'll attend the workshop on the 4th of May and talk about some of the other issues about the Fisherman's Bend debacle and the cost, the unfair cost to this community. Yep.
Thanks very much. Adrian Jackson.
Adrian Jackson, Middle Park. I've lived in Port Phillip since 1980, and when I house shared with a couple of army officers, when the girls moved on to postings, I then bought a house in 1983. My rates then were about $500 per annum, thanks to the good old days. Now, my opinion is that rates... My opinion is that ratepayers must come first. And Pat Brown, when she was a councillor, she did a lot to make sure we kept our rates low. She was only councillor in the first term of the Port Phillip Council. We're not here to finance renters and visitors, except for the core functions like rubbish collection and those sorts of things, and maintaining the park. We're not here to finance the lifestyles in the arts community or art centres or duplicating state functions like housing. It's a load of rubbish. I absolutely thought it was disgraceful that millions of dollars from our cash reserves rated to help finance the Pride Centre. I voted yes, by the way, on that issue. It's ridiculous. It's a private club that provided some services. It's ridiculous. Also, I don't want to see my rates being spent on excessive numbers of libraries. We have 5. Get rid of 2 of them. I know you're looking at doing something with Middle Park, something different. Too many. We've got the smallest municipality in Victoria, and we've got 5 libraries. It's crazy. 4 of them down the northern end, and 1 St Kilda, a big one, down this end. I mean, my rates are not here to help mind other people's children. That's what grandparents are there for. And if you look over in Middle Park, the grandparents are always looking after the kids. Or Uncle Adrian, who looked after my nephew about 30 years ago. And I've offered to look after her, he and his de facto wife's child when it's 2 and can walk and talk. So, if you can't look after your children, don't have them. We spend a lot of money on books in libraries, magazines, newspapers. Why don't people go to the newsagents and shops and support local businesses and support the authors of these books by buying them instead of getting them all in the libraries? It's ridiculous. I know the libraries are used for the internet as well. We have so many events, particularly the St Kilda Festival. Nothing wrong with the event itself, but our rates are poured into these events for outsiders to be entertained. What for? Ridiculous. I'd like to see a 30% reduction in council staff numbers over 3 years, and I believe the attrition rate of council staff is about 10% per year, so that should balance out nicely, I would have thought, after over 3 years. Do you want a strepsil? Yeah, suck on a strepsil. So I'd like to see some council services closed or reduced. That PR cell, what do we need that for? Writing these media releases to newspapers that don't print them. The local newspapers are useless. If you want more funds, why don't you ask the state government to have a poll tax on the renters? That's a topical issue, I suppose. And also, finally, what is this sustainability hub that a lot of money is being spent on? What is that? If you could just explain that. That's it.
Thanks very much, Adrian. Councillors, that's the submissions from the community. Do you have any questions? Councillor Pearl.
Will officers explain what the sustainability hub is?
Through you, Mr Mayor, the Sustainability Hub is a partnership project that is being investigated with the City of Melbourne and the state government, and so it's looking at the possibility of having a site in the Fisherman's Bend precinct that would be an innovative site around sustainability management. So, for example, it would co-locate possible facilities, which could include anything from a resource recovery centre through to organics recycling. So at the moment that's in the feasibility stage with a business case that's being led by the Metropolitan Waste Group that the City of Port Phillip is a partner to.
Councillor Copsey.
I'm happy to move unless there's any questions.
Thanks. It's been moved. You've got a question?
I do. Can I just check? We have various processes to help ratepayers if they don't have the cash to put it against their property over time? Do we not have that, and to assist pensioners and people who have at different times rate increases?
Excuse me, through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor, yes, Council does have arrangements for ratepayers who are experiencing financial hardship. In addition to pensioners, as it is, whether they're experiencing financial hardship or not, they are eligible for rebates. But any individuals who are experiencing a difficulty with their rates, there are arrangements. One of those potential arrangements is a deferral of up to 50% of their rates, which then will attract interest, and at some stage when the estate is, the property is sold or it forms part of their estate, council would recoup the overdue rates at that stage. So we are quite open to discussions with our ratepayers when they're experiencing financial hardship. And like all councils, many councils, although we are one of the more generous, many councils respond to their ratepayers in such situations.
Can I just get a follow-up question on, well, not follow-up. So one of the things mentioned, we're already under a rate capping system, so we're already trying to meet all of our obligations on a thing. But can you explain to me that over time, I never quite get my head around it, over time, if we don't take the rate increase at whatever level it may be set, that the gap gets wider for the next generation, and that means that our ability to provide services and maintain this great municipality changes over time. Could you explain that, please, Dennis?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The budget is always set in the context of the longer-term financial strategy of the City of Port Phillip. You, as a council, in December of last year, adopted the 10-year financial outlook with respect to how officers projected and forecasted the financial outcomes for the city over the next 10 years. Part of that review was to look at our modelling with respect to if we did indeed not increase rates at the rate cap level, the ESC and government mandated level every year. It showed us that without the rate cap increase, and for this year we've projected 2.5%, but into the future it basically aligns with CPI is the assumption that we have made. If we, for example, were to take a year off with respect to not increasing the rates revenue, our overall rates revenue by the rate cap, that would effectively become a cumulative issue through to, because it wouldn't just be a one-off hit, we wouldn't have that in our base revenue for the following year. That the $4 million that we are putting forward in this budget as the 2.5 rate cap increase, that would not be then baked into the future revenue stream moving forward, and that would leave a significant rate gap. Our modelling showed a rate gap of about $70 million if we did not pass on the 2.5% rate increase. It's a two-pronged strategy. In addition to the rate increase, we have invested, as was referred to earlier, Council this time last year adopted to invest $23 million over the next 2.5 years in transforming the customer and employee experience of City of Port Phillip. The business modelling from that business case shows that we will get a contribution to that overall $70 million gap of $35 million through that 10-year period. So it is a pronged attack on maintaining our financial security, and the rate cap increase, we believe, is part of a fiscally responsible budget that we've put out. We're hoping to put out with your support tonight to our community for feedback.
Just further to that point, if we didn't collect $4 million worth of rates this year and went in with a zero rate rise budget and eliminated $4 million worth of ongoing residual spend within this organisation, what would be the net effect on that rate gap now and into the future?
As long as the reduction in expense base was not just a one-off, it would obviously equate to reducing the overall impact of that that accumulation of the gap. But that would obviously then leave councillors to review and make some decisions based on input from officers and the community around the services that may be impacted moving forward as a result of that reduction in cost base.
I did note in the document that there's a lot of money that we get from fees and parking. So if we were to perhaps not take the rate gap, would we have to perhaps make up where, because the reality is costs are rising for everybody and councils included, would we have to look at raising fees and parking? Would that be where our only other source of revenue?
Again, it would be a scenario with many moving pieces. Oh, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. There would be a scenario of many moving pieces. Revenue, if there was a shortfall in revenue, that potentially will impact our ability to provide the services that we currently provide, and also to support the growth of the city. As we know, we have some growth challenges coming down the pike to us with respect to Fisherman's Bend and just general growth in the city. We would also then have to review the maintenance and renewal and upgrade schedules for our asset base. The city has $3.2 billion of community assets that have been invested in and grown over the life of this city. We obviously, like every council, struggle in the current environment to maintain those assets to provide the services the community expects. That would have to be something that would be up for review. And again, it would be difficult to just pinpoint one area that we could focus on, because the council and all councils are very complicated and complex organisations. The variety of services that we provide unprecedented versus any other organisation that I personally have been involved in. So from that perspective, there would be a lot of moving pieces that we would have to come to council for a decision.
If I may just add to that, I think there's generally, in our discussion that we've had through you, Mr. Mayor, around the financial strategy and the different levers that are available to us, if we were to take out $4 million from the revenue, from the rating revenue base, there'd be a number of levers that would be available. You could do a permanent cost reduction in our expenditure. Our advice to you is that there's no more room for efficiency savings, so that would have to come through reductions in services. Alternatively, you could look for alternative revenue sources that you'd again have to have permanent ongoing increases in those revenue sources over and above the 2.75% assumption that we currently have. It could be a mix of those things, but you'd need to have deep consultation, probably in cutting services in particular, and childcare, that one that was raised tonight. There would be a whole range of redundancies, so the costs in year one we would not find permanent savings in year one, maybe in future years, but you'd have to do that with deep engagement with the community, and then there'd be a whole range of redundancy costs which probably add to our expenditure in year one.
It's minor, but it's a hot topic, and it's parking fees. So from my analysis, all the parking fees have increased, except for Fisherman's Bend, which we've agreed to decrease to $1, and also South Melbourne Market. Now, I'm wondering why that's been treated differently, if you could outline the rationale behind that, and why Waterfront Place is the highest at $13.20 than anywhere else in the municipality. I'm just quite curious about how that sort of rationale is rolled out.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I have to take on notice the question around Waterfront Place, but I think there's a long-standing kind of policies, fees and charges around parking built up over many years. We haven't made a big change in that particular place this year. In terms of Fisherman's Bend, there was a deep discussion the councillors had with the community and debate here around whether the utilisation levels, the occupancy and the fees were gelling. The occupancy levels weren't where we were expecting them to be. There's a consideration given that reducing the fees may assist with parking available, with getting the right level of utilisation there. And South Melbourne Market, I'm not fully across, but it may well be that I think from discussions there, we thought we'd got to a price point at this particular point in time. But I can come back later with more of that on notice, so it's quite a detailed question.
Thank you. Just to correct, it's the foreshore area excluding Waterfront Place. Waterfront Place is still $12.90. So, yeah,
thank you. I have to take that on notice.
Thanks.
Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so we've got Councillor Copsey, who's moved the officers' rec. Seconded by Councillor Crawford. Councillor Copsey, do you wish to speak?
So presuming this passes tonight, here is our annual opportunity for the community to participate in our budgeting update. We'll be taking submissions from the community over our 28-day public consultation period before we adopt the final budget update later in the year, and we'll welcome all submissions received during this period. I feel that there are some groups in the community who are really well aware of the opportunity to put in budget submissions. And to those who are watching at home and who have never considered it before, if you've got a community project or a facility or program that you consider is worthy and you'd like to see council look at the allocation towards it in the coming financial year, please do engage in this budget submission process. It's for everybody, and we'll be examining all submissions received during this period very thoroughly with the assistance of officers. Thank you to officers for all of the hard work that's gone into the development of the budget. It is rigorous and it's a transparent process that we've undertaken to share with our community each year. And it's always excellent for councillors to dive into the detail and consider the value that we're providing to the community, which we strive to make a high one.
Councillor Crawford.
Look, it's a difficult discussion. Budgets are about what you prioritise and what you value. And I think the thing around budgets is that many things make up a place in a society that we want to live in and be part of. And so that is a complex sort of tapestry that we weave by providing so many services to an amazing area, and you know we have some big iconic assets and a beach front to look after, and in the green parks and a whole lot of things that we provide that are really valued by our community. So I do seek people to submit to your either support or things that you don't think are valid for or that are worthy of our support in this process. So one of the things that really struck me as I was going through the documentation, and I can't remember whether it was previously laid out this year, is that how much we rely on not just our rates. There are other communities that don't get revenue from parking and I don't know how they afford to do all the things they do in their council, and there would be probably no discussion of any not taking rates there, but there's huge amounts that we take, that we fund the various things we value in our community from not just rates. So rates alone don't cover the costs of all the amazing things that is our community. And I think that's a really valid point to make at this stage too. So if we take that money out, I just can't see where else it would come from. Should we be conservative? Yes. Should we prioritise? Yes. But we also need to have the bigger discussion about how do we support our community who have some rate pressures, but how do we also maintain the kind of society we actually want to live in is also part of the bigger conversation.
Councillor Bond?
It's very easy, Councillor Crawford. The other cities that don't have our level of income don't have our level of expenditure. I think we hear time and time again that we've got more staff than most of these other municipalities. We spend more on lots of things than most of these other municipalities. What we're here tonight is to send this budget out to the community, and hopefully the community will pick it apart. I think it's very pleasing to have a couple of people come along tonight and ask us not to spend money, which is I think it's about my 7th budget at the City of Port Phillip. It's the first time people have come along and said, please don't spend as much money as you normally do. It's usually a procession of people saying, I want more money for this and more money for that. So great to have you here, the ratepayers of Port Phillip, and I look forward to your submission and look forward to trying to implement a few of the savings that I know I've certainly got in this budget. At a certain point in time in the future, we'll put forward a list of savings, and hopefully we can get a really good outcome for the ratepayers of this municipality at the appropriate time in about a month when we hear those submissions.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bond. Do you wish to close, Councillor? Oh, sorry, Councillor Pearl. How dare I?
Thanks very much. I'll support this motion this evening as it's on its way out for public consultation, and agree with Councillor Bond's comments about the community that came in tonight to speak. We should embrace and welcome diversity of thought and diversity of ideas. And we shouldn't be scared of getting proposals for 0 rate increases or lower than proposed rate increases, because we don't always know everything and we're not always the experts. So let's be open to what the community and others show us in the documents we provide them, and be open to what comes back. There is one trend in these documents that concerns me slightly if I look at 20 or 30 years. And there's a bit of unnecessary spending in this budget, as there are in all, and to highlight is the decisions of the past that come back and haunt you. So this council is spending a couple of $100,000 every year on interest repayments on debt we don't need, because a previous council assumed certain forecasters and situations that they got wrong, and we're lugging hundreds of thousands of dollars every single year on debt that we can't repay, which is stopping us providing services to the tune of, since this council, by the time it gets out, almost $1 million because of a poor decision in the past. Debt is dumb. Cash is king. We all know that. We learnt that in primary school, I hope. And the decisions going forward 20 or 30 years from now, I think this council's inability to address some structural problems with our budget means that the legacy we're going to pass on to future councils is they're going to have reduced options to fund infrastructure investment in Fisherman's Bend. And what is that going to mean is that they're going to have to borrow. The borrower is slave to the lender. It's not a good situation to be in. There's no such thing in government terms as good debt. None whatsoever, under any circumstances. As we can see in our own experience now, this council will spend close to $1 million in interest on debt we don't need because we don't understand what we're doing. We need a balanced budget, we all agree with that, but we need to review our spending so to ensure that this council passes on sustainable reserves to build infrastructure in the future, and we don't burden ourselves, our children and our grandchildren with large amounts of debt, as other councils have done, such as the City of Yarra, with a surplus of about $1 million with tens of millions of dollars of debt that can't foreseeably be repaid. Let's not put ourselves in that situation. I'm very much looking forward to seeing what the community comes back with, but let's not be afraid of reading those submissions and adopting some of those options. Happy to support this motion this evening.
Councillor Copsey, do you wish to close? Put it to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thanks very much, everyone. Proposed tenancy agreement, Linden Art Gallery. Councillor Copsey?
There's no objection. I was going to propose that we move 14.2 and 14.3 on block.
I don't object to that. Is there a seconder for both of those? Councillor Brand? And
14.3 is Assembly of Councillors.
Speakers, do you wish to speak to that, Councillor Copsey? Councillor Brand? Yep, sure.
Speaking in favour of the Linden proposed tenancy agreement, which has taken quite a long time to come to fruition, and it's been a long and lumpy road, and it's suddenly become a smooth sort of highway. I think it's quite it's smoothed itself out. I think everybody at Linden is very pleased with the final result, and I think the officers here are. and I hope that councillors are. There's really just one more gate, I suppose, at the end of this journey. In a couple of years there'll be a review of the leasing and the leasing arrangement and the funding deed, which will be the final step before settling on a long-term lease under the similar sort of terms. So we've got the funding lease line. We've got the funding lease now aligned with the funding. What's it called? The funding deed. The funding deed aligned with the lease. They're finally in line with each other, which is great. And the lease has finally sorted out Linden's ability to rent out its subsidiary rooms to other groups and create what will become a thriving arts hub, as we like to use those sorts of terms. But it's a good setup that we've got now, and I think Linden's now fully housed and funded and freed up to participate in as a really active agent, I think, in the Art and Soul Prosperous City policy, which is their intent, and I think it's all sort of all systems go now. So I note also that the director of Linden, Melinda Martin, was intending to be here tonight to make a little speech, but she could not make it tonight for other reasons. So I want to say, I can't really say it on behalf of Linden, but anyway, I know what she was going to say, and it is a bit of a thank you all round, I think.
Thank you.
Where would I be without you, Bondi? Do you wish to close, Councillor Copsey? I'll move to the vote of both of these. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Councillors, notices of motion. There are none. Reports by councillor delegates. There are none. Urgent business. Councillors, there are 4 items of urgent business which are 4 separate proposed motions to be presented in the upcoming MAV State Council meeting. Firstly, I need a mover and second of a councillor to consider the 4 items of urgent business. That's moved Councillor Voss, seconded Councillor Baxter. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. I tend to ask who wants to move in relation to these. Do you want to deal with them as a block because we've conversed with them?
Can I ask a quick question? Is that okay?
Sure.
We put these motions up every year and there's a lot of excitement the week before they get put up, and they always seem to be put up as urgent items of business. I'm just wondering, how do we manage the effectiveness of these motions over time in terms of what council, if they get passed, question. And what the hell are we doing with this stuff, though, as time goes by?
So, I just wondered...
Sorry, how do we measure the effectiveness of the motions that are successfully passed at MAV that the City of Port Phillip puts up is the question.
Through you, Mr Mayor. So the motions that are passed by the Council go to the annual general meeting or the ordinary meeting, and at that point they may or may not be passed. So there is that first hurdle to be undertaken. Officers certainly provide advice to the councillors or to the council when the outcome of that meeting is known, so that we have an understanding of the proportion and those motions that have been passed by the committee. I think there is probably an opportunity for the councillor delegate that attends the meetings of the MAV to seek some advice around what progress has been undertaken against previous motions, and then bring that back to council for you to consider.
Thanks very much. Any further questions? Do I have any movers of any motions, either singly or en bloc? Councillor Copsey?
I'll move the motion in relation to urgent item 17.1, the MAV State Council motion relating to the Australian Packaging Covenant, litter management.
Can I have a seconder for that? Councillor Voss?
Thank you. I won't read it all out because it's quite long, but it's there on the screen. Essentially, this is a request to endorse the MAV's Rescue Our Recycling policy, which was launched recently, urging an overhaul, essentially, of the recycling industry, given the crisis, the waste crisis that many councils found themselves in due to the failure of our local recycling industry, and congratulate the MAV on that policy. To note the critical importance of product stewardship and polluters pays principles within that policy. And then finally, to advocate for the Australian Packaging Covenant to alter its strategic plan 2017 to 2022, insisting on a larger focus on litter and post-consumer waste management. And I might add to this motion, at the end of that sentence, in addition to the currently identified goals.
There are issues about amending a motion.
I think it's minor. It's to clarify that the intent of this is not to try. Yeah. So it's on the the third dot point. So the next slide. And it would be a larger focus on litter and post-consumer waste management in addition to the two existing goals. I think that still reads all right. So this is to essentially the Australian Packaging Covenant deals with creators of packaging and their life cycle management of that product. It's good to see that there is an existing focus on reducing the amount of single-use packaging, as I read it, and to optimising resource recovery. This is to request that the covenant also focus on the post-consumer problem. Yeah, thank you. Is that noted? That formality, thank you. We know with our 11 kilometres of foreshore and all of our parks and our fantastic volunteer groups, including the Eco Centre who are here tonight, that Port Phillip bears a large amount of the brunt of unnecessary packaging litter, with it washing up on our beaches and foreshore. And this is to try and bring home to the creators of some of that waste a bit of the cost borne by those who have to spend so much time and resource cleaning it up. So I think it's an admirable goal. There's probably more that I'd like to see the Australian Packaging Covenant cover, but I think that this is a good start for tonight, and I hope councillors will support this.
I won't be supporting this. I was actually involved with a number of different companies in the Australian Packaging Covenant when it first came in the mid-2000s. I believe it's been around about 10, 15 years now. I've written a number of policy documents. I've gone through the annual reporting process on behalf of a number of different companies. The purpose of the National Australian Packaging Covenant when it first came in was to encourage companies to reduce the amount of packaging they would put on their products and work out ways of using different grade cardboard, recycling product, less plastic, that sort of thing, on the input side of the business. I haven't been involved for a couple of years, but I think it's now morphed into some sort of body to make industry responsible for the collection of litter by the addition of this particular motion into its goals. It's not why it was set up. The responsibility for collecting litter is that of local government. So if we have a litter problem in Port Phillip, it's us as the local government that needs to sort that out, because that is clearly one of our responsibilities. My experience of the National Packaging Covenant, as it was previously known, was there was very little interest in what companies were doing. You just sent in a report, that's it, you never heard from them. And seeing that this is what they're focused on, I can see why there's probably no great advances being made in the use of recycled cardboard and plastic and things like that amongst companies that actually produce this product for a living. This just creates an unnecessary burden, a financial burden, as well as on companies that are out there, and makes life harder for Australian businesses, that overseas businesses who we are competing against on a national scale are not subject to. So this is a bad thing for Australian industry. It's not achieving its original goals, so I won't be supporting it.
Thank you, Andrew. I'd like to speak. I was actually on the council of the National Packaging Covenant, and hitherto it's always funded and invested in new litter and waste technology. Until the recent strategic plan, it was always part of the expectation that as an aspect of its product stewardship, it would undertake those responsibilities, because the post-consumer transaction externalities of litter and waste are really important, and so I have a different view of the role of the covenant in dealing with post-consumer costs. Councillor Brand.
I think the work that Councillor Bond describes in the packaging industry of actually looking at new ways to design and make packaging, I think it's really interesting, really important work, and I wouldn't want to see that diminished at all. I think it's a very, very big part of the future, but I think that Councillor Copsey's small addition there will at least not discourage them from continuing to do that, and I think that's very important. So I'm happy to be voting for this.
Do you wish to close, Councillor Copsey?
I do agree that the creation and the ending up on our beaches of wasteful packaging does create a huge and unnecessary cost impost, and it is not fair that that be borne by those municipalities and those organisations who then have to go and clean up after these companies. It is absolutely fair that, as well as focusing on reducing the output of wasteful packaging and unnecessary packaging, we try and recover some of the cost. It's really interesting to hear particular councillors argue for council to cut our services and reduce our budget in one breath, but then also oppose an attempt to get industry to shoulder its fair share of responsibility for the amount of waste and litter created. I hope councillors will support this motion, and I hope it's successful at the MAV State Council. Did you have something else you wanted to add, Councillor Bond? I can hear you talking off mic.
Order. Sorry, Councillor Bond, please don't interrupt Councillor Copsey.
Roads, rates and rubbish is part of what councils deliver, and in picking up rubbish that is created through unnecessary and wasteful packaging, council fulfils that role, but it also falls very much on the shoulders of volunteers who give up their weekends and all of their hours to try and keep our streets clean. And this is a good way to have industry play its part in that community effort as well.
Thanks very much, Councillor Copsey. Let's go to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried.
Can I request a division, please?
All those in favour? Councillor Copsey, Simic, Brand, Gross, Voss, Crawford, Baxter. Against? Councillor Bond and Councillor Pearl. Declare it carried. Let's move on to Councillor Voss.
Thank you. I'd like to move item 17.2, please.
Seconder, please.
I'll just tell you what it is.
I'll second it.
Okay, so, and that is that the Municipal Association advocates for the Office of the Victorian Government Architects, the OVGA, to conduct a review of the cumulative effect of low-impact facilities covered under the Telecommunications Act 1997 and other state federal facilities, such as PTV and Yarra Tram substations on public road reserves, and present a series of recommendations for improving the amenity and the co-location, underground, etc., placement of facilities to the Victorian Government.
Thanks very much. Do you wish to speak to that?
So just briefly, we are seeing so much going on at the moment. We've heard this earlier in the council meeting about the NBN works that have occurred and the park wasn't repatriated. We've heard about the footpaths being pulled up and then not being put back together, the asphalt not the same standard. And this is the sorts of things that we're seeing everywhere. Our public spaces, our plazas, they're becoming clogged by essential services, and these things are all needed. I'm not saying they're not. NBN boxes, cabinets, public payphones, trams, bus shelters, bins, tram substations and more, but no one is giving any thought to how they should be placed and where they should be placed. At the moment, they, they can do whatever they want, and this really results in a very poor outcome for our community and increasing hazards for people that can't see, wheelchairs, etc. So they're all considered, many of these are considered low impact facilities under the Telecommunication Acts, and so they don't need any permits by council. And there's no overarching authority to handle any complaints and consider the bigger urban issues. So councils are often the first point of contact, and unfortunately we can't do anything. We've seen issues with at the junction with the tram substation, and this has really been quite negative for our community. So what we're saying here is that the OVGA should conduct a review of what's going on and what impact the installation of these facilities are having on our public space, and consider the benefits and implementation of a more coordinated approach to installation and, among other things, to combat this urban clutter and make sure that they abide by the standards that our community needs, that money is just not wasted and goes down the drain.
Thanks very much. Any further speakers? Move to the vote. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thanks very much, Councillor Voss. Third one is the landfill revenue and site contamination management. So this is to do with activism by the MAV. Does anyone wish to move that, Councillor Copsey? I'll move it. Seconded by Councillor Brand. Do I wish to speak to it? No. I think it's self-evident. Councillor Copsey. Oh, Councillor Brand. Councillor Copsey.
Yeah, look, I can see that there's a really good principle underlying this, but I'm unsure about the source of funds to support management of contaminated land. The landfill levy, yeah, look, I think it's very important, but I am not sure about the specification of the funding source. I'd be happy with an advocacy motion that called on the state government to allocate funds to this important management role, but I'm not entirely sold that the landfill levy is the place that I would want to see those being drawn from. So I'm open to being convinced by arguments, but at the moment that's where I'm sitting on this one, and perhaps it's something we can return to in future.
Councillor Baxter.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Copsey. My issue here is that contamination management and remediation is extraordinarily expensive, and I would worry that if all councils across Victoria started depleting the sustainability fund for these purposes, there would actually not be much left to deal with the waste crisis. And I think that the priority for the sustainability fund should be in dealing with the waste crisis. So I'm not dead set against this, but I worry that this might be a diversion of funds away from something else that we need quite a lot.
Any others wish to speak? Councillor Bowen?
Won't be supporting this. The landfill levy was meant to go towards recycling solutions. We already have a process in place to deal with the management of contaminated land, and that is that the original polluter, the original contaminator, is responsible for the clean-up. I don't think our landfill levy should be used for this purpose. Strengthening of the EPA Act to give the EPA better powers to ensure that the clean-up occurs would deal with this. Shifting the funding source for the contaminated land clean-up doesn't deal with that deficiency in the EPA Act.
Anyone else wish to speak? I will speak. So the purposes for which the land the Sustainability Fund can be used clearly embraces remediation of contaminated sites. This is important because it's in step with the views of most of local government players. Secondly, it mainly relates to quite poor rural shires that have real problems with contamination and do need assistance from the Sustainability Fund. And thirdly, the EPA Amendment Act, I can't recall it exactly, but I'm sure it would embrace this form of expenditure, which absolutely needs to happen because throughout our rural and regional areas there are contaminated sites that cannot be remediated by the relatively impecunious rural and regional councils. We need to assist these people in doing this. And I suppose the big, important and symbolic act is unlocking the keys to this Sustainability Fund. And finally, can I just say, there are problems with recycling. I don't adopt the word crisis. I think there are real problems. There are real opportunities. There's technology that's going to do extraordinary things with plastics and paper. Great ideas are surfacing over use of glass and soft plastics in road base and road surface. So I like to avoid the word crisis and use the softer euphemism challenge. So please, I support this. I'll move to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? It's clearly lost. 17.4, the fourth motion is state regulation of e-scooters. Does this take anyone's fancy? Yes. Okay, moved Councillor Crawford. Seconded? Councillor Voss. Councillor Crawford. No, I don't think. I think it's pretty self-evident. I think they can read it. Yeah. Councillor Copsey? No?
I think it's really wise that we try and come up with some uniform rules by which these new transport choices can play. Unfortunately, we've seen when they're introduced ad hoc that can have difficult outcomes for communities and really inhibit the uptake of what can be very versatile and convenient travel options for people around our city. So it would be great to see the state take the lead on regulating e-scooters so that we can have the benefits of this sustainable transport option and mitigate any possible negatives.
Okay. Councillor Crawford, do you wish to close? I'll move to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Declare it carried. Thanks very much, everyone. We now have some confidential matters. We have one confidential item tonight. Councillor Pearl.
I, Councillor Marcus Pearl, declare that in relation to the item we're about to consider, I have a direct conflict of interest. I'll now remove myself.
Thanks very much, Councillor Pearl. We need to close the meeting. I'll now call on a councillor to move that the meeting be closed to members of the public. The title of it is and Core Assurance Services. It's essentially a contract. Thanks, Adrian. So I'll now call on a councillor to move. Move Councillor Voss, seconded Councillor Copsey, the dynamic duo. Councillor Voss has moved and Councillor Copsey has seconded that the meeting be closed to members of the public in accordance with section 89(2)(d) of the Local Government Act as the item relates to a contractual matter. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous-ish.